On September 10th, 2025, Charlie Kirk was assassinated at an event at Utah Valley University that was held by the Turning Point USA project that he founded and ran. He was using his words, and somebody took some actions to ensure that he would never be able to speak again. He was 31 at the time, but due to the actions that he'd taken, that calling that he had followed by dropping out of college at 18, I think that makes it 13 years since, a lucky number 13 there. But he had since then, in those years, spoken to so many people, so many more people in public, recorded and over phone, over streaming, just so many more people than most of us in the world would, even if we lived to our old age and died of natural causes in our 90s. And as being this very public figure, like he was speaking in social spheres, he was speaking in political spheres, he was talking about all these things that people had a lot of interest in and doing it a lot. It makes sense that the perception that we have of him, and have you seen of how his life ended, how he chose to live, and what that's going to mean going forward is as diverse as it is in a place like the United States of America that is very diverse, and then just other people in the world being aware of what was going on with this and just trying to find out. Just like I am one of those people out here in Nairobi, Kenya, and I'll just give you some thoughts about my experience of how I found out about it, what I've looked into, my concerns, what I've seen, and some of the things I've done since then, what it means to me in a way, and what I'm hoping will come from this, and what I'm perceiving. It's just, I think perception matters. It matters a lot in just how we deal with the world. And even just already from some of you, by watching the video or listening to the video, there's things you've perceived about me that might already affect what you think or how you take or how you define what I'm going to say from now on, which is part of existence, which is okay. But I didn't want to just do that. I wanted to go in this and talk about and see about and research about and find out about and try to get some understanding out there. So this is my kind of experience of how I found out about this and what happened since. So it was on the 10th. I don't know how I'd found out about the iryna zarutska issue, which was a young lady. She was 23 at the time. And she had actually been stabbed previously in August 22nd of 2025, but we did hear about it. It was fatally. Some of you might have heard of the story. I'll talk about it a bit here and in the rest of this. So just be prepared. I mean, it's a situation where I got wind of it. The video had just been released, I think on the 5th, if I'm not mistaken, the 5th of September, the video had been released. This had happened in Charlotte, North Carolina. She was coming from work, 23-year-old, goes on this light rail system. There's a camera over there, and she just got stabbed in the neck. And I was hearing some descriptions, seeing the reaction, people getting information about it, why was this covered up, and then all these things, and people who are mad about it, some people were just acting like it's not a thing. And I had been scrolling around, just checking. It was X at this time. I was scrolling around and checking because I was thinking, okay, this is something that I'm going to speak about. And I've already recorded a separate video with some of my thoughts 48 hours after finding out about Charlie Kirk that you can check out as well. But I'm sitting there thinking like, okay, I'm going to collect some of this information, and what am I going to do with this? How am I going to present this? How am I going to write about this? What does this mean about society? And then the news of Charlie Kirk's being shot comes in, and I'm scrolling there. I'm just like, okay, what's going on with this? Trying to understand how people are not really. Some people are taking iryna's death and saying it means this other thing, and some other people are saying it means nothing. And then the Charlie Kirk thing comes in. I'm avoiding seeing the actual thing of iryna because I'm thinking like, I don't need that evil in my mind. And don't you put that evil on me, Ricky Bobby, type of thing. And just wondering that thing with the internet, like. It happens. I'm scrolling and the video comes. Charlie Kirk is speaking, and then you hear the shot, and then you see him go, and then the blood spurts out, and I'm just like anime type blood, and I'm just like, okay, that looks fatal. Doesn't look like he can survive that. I see them take it off. I see other videos. I see other content. I'm just trying to understand just what's happening with this, thinking this is kind of big. Like, what's going to happen with this? Just from the little that I knew of who Charlie Kirk was, even if it was just independent, that would have been big enough, but I was factoring in the current feelings that were going on. But is that just overly online things? How much play does this get in the rest of the IRL? I don't like that term IRL because I think the internet is part of real life, and we will see some examples as I continue in this about some people who might not necessarily understand that aspect of things. But there is a different thing of when you actually see something versus when you hear about something versus when it's translated through other people. Your perception actually matters in that, because if you're taking somebody else's word on it, you're going through their perception filters, and sometimes you already have perceptions, and then you're actually bringing things to backfill that point of view that you have. And those are some of the things that I know I do, that I know a lot of people do. And I'm just trying to figure out how to best get past that to get to the point of actually understanding some of these things. So while this is happening, I decided, okay, I've seen this, it's horrific. Let me also check out the iryna video. And I finally watched the actual thing because I'd seen how some people had spoken about it, were saying nobody helped her, or why did the people sit there and not do anything? And I'm wondering, okay, just the same way that iryna was focused on her phone before this horrific person did this to her, those other people are also focused on what they're doing. I'm thinking it's probably unusual for most people to use public transport. Like, I don't go stand there and look around people and scan, but that's not me. But let's say I was sitting there because I was tired and I was sketching, I was thinking, I was listening to my headphones, and that happened. How fast would I have noticed what would have happened? I'm trying to relate and see, like, maybe I wouldn't have noticed, but I'd like to think that I would have done something. And in that video, I'd already seen some things of after the thing happened. Some people came to her, but that was too late, because you finally watch the video and you see her react, get shocked, look into her hands, slump over, and fall down, and is covered by the camera, and you see the blood pooling and dripping down into the wheel well, and it's just horrible stuff. And kind of contrasting what that was compared to seeing what happened with the kinetic way that the Charlie Kirk thing, just seeing them back to back, and it was quite a thing. So my 42-year-old self is here in Nairobi, Kenya, scrolling this with that 9 hours ahead time difference. It's late, and then just led to just hours more just scrolling in and taking in those first reactions from some people who are on this side, some people saying it means this, some people saying the shooter was this, some people saying you're ignoring this, some people saying you're forgetting iryna, some people just all the discussion and the talking and the things and all those things that were going on, and the information that came out from there, people jumping on things earlier. But I already have that thing where if something big happens, this has happened because just my personal life, and also just I've been doing some content here for some time, kind of dropped off for some time, but I've been blogging since 2008, I think, on Rantathon. And one thing I started doing probably at least in 2020, I think a little before 2020, or yeah, probably before that, was just thinking, like, I don't know when the first of this 24 to 48 hours later series was, where I just thought, like, there are situations, I think it was with actual school shootings, because it's been happening for a decent enough time in the United States of America. And I just thought, with some of these things, you don't have to make a declarative statement of what the thing means or how important the thing is, even though it seems like it's a major thing that's happening. You can wait 24 to 48 hours. And in many cases, what you had to say is not so important. Like, if it's something where, if me speaking out immediately might be able to save someone's life, then I can think I gotta say something immediately. But there's this tendency of people to just rush, especially with access to social media, and we'll see how that has kind of gone back on some people in this case here. They just feel like they gotta say something immediately, or do something immediately, act on that impulse and express themselves. Is it parasocial? Is that kind of thing that's called? But I thought 24 to 48 hours later, because normally if some information comes out and then you wait 24 to 48 hours and you had a questionable information about that, some other information will come out to either counter what you thought, answer some questions you had from that, reinforce it to give you a better point of view on it. So I thought you can at least wait with that. So I did a video already with the 28 to 48 hours later. It was 48 hours after. And since then, I've just been compiling this long document that I'll post on my blog that will have a whole bunch of different sources, a bunch of different links. And with this video, I will be splicing some of them into this. I don't know. I'm still not sure how I'm presenting it. I think I also knew that once this happened, this was most definitely going to be part of my Anyone But K series, which is a series that I thought I've looked into who Che Guevara is, and I've seen a lot of people on the political left all around the world who revere this individual, and he's kind of a garbage human being. And the things that he's done, he was a outright murderer. The things that he did with his country didn't make sense. I didn't really agree with his policies and whatnot. But it's not just not agreeing with his policies. The actual actions that he did, the content of his character, was not a good human being. Yet, you have people celebrating him. And even goes further. It's just like when you're here in Nairobi, Kenya, or all around the world, people, for various reasons, get shirts from other places that they don't necessarily mean. Whereas in the United States of America, it's kind of like that red MAGA hat that will be talked about here. The red MAGA hat, people normally wear that signaling something. Here, if you happen to see someone in a red hat that has something on it, chances are they just got it from some place that happened to have a color that was cheap enough in some market that they got and was hand down and whatnot. Like one of the regular things is like, let's say there's a Super Bowl and you have the Eagles versus Kansas City Chiefs. They have a situation where, would you wonder how they get all that merchandise? Like the second they win, you see all the players with it. They normally get some consignment, and then they make like 10,000 champion, like Kansas City Chiefs, Super Bowl 57 or whatever number it was, champions. 10,000 Philadelphia Eagles, Super Bowl 57 champion. And then whoever wins, the merch gets sent out. The people who don't win, that stuff often gets shipped off to developing nations and other places and charities. It's not like just disseminated back into the countries that, or the locations it was intended to be for, if the people had actually won. So there's a lot of that where people wear like, you see people wearing shirts saying, okay, this is someone's reunion. They're not from that family. They just happen to get that because maybe after the reunion, the people just gave the clothes out to some charity drive. So there's all that kind of thing. So having lived in the United States of America, where certain things are perceived as a certain way by just wearing it, you're wearing a uniform, you're part of a team, you're declaring some kind of message, and going to other places where that message isn't there. Regardless, I've seen people with a Che Guevara shirt here in Kenya. Now, I don't know how much they knew about it. I should have stopped and asked them. I'll start doing that going forward. But I was just thinking with the Anyone But Che series, anyone but Che Guevara is somebody who is better fit to be on that kind of shirt design. And that this red shirt design with the white and the black, it's an aesthetically pleasing design. So I have a bunch of people on that. And the second this happened with Charlie Kirk, I was like, most definitely, he's going to be part of that. Just from the little that I knew of him, I think he's already better than Che Guevara. And since I've looked in, and I will provide some evidence to back up what I'm saying, I think it's even yet more fitting that he can be someone to be on a shirt like this. So with Iryna, I was wondering, would she also fit? Probably do a separate one with her. I was thinking, is it wrong to do it because of what she did in that situation? But regardless, just coming back to this one, I think now I'm going to get into the main body of the actual post. And thank y'all for actually watching this to begin with. It's a long one. It's taken me some time, where I've been compiling this over a couple of days and still taking in information from different people I listen to and people I don't listen to, just trying to get to reaction, trying to get some understanding out there. And in one part of me, I've been buoyed. What's that word? Like, the buoy that floats in the water. I don't know how to say that word actually out loud. I can check like some pronunciation thing. But in one way, I've been buoyed to say that I'm realizing certain things that other people then realize. I'm like, okay, I thought of this part, wrote it down, typed it down in this draft, and I go watch someone else, and then they say the thing. I'm like, okay, because enough human beings are seeing what I'm seeing. I'm not like some super genius that has some super kind of omniscient or point of view of getting information that somebody else doesn't have. Just like Charlie Kirk was not somebody who had some sort of access to information that nobody had. Just like the people who are objecting to Charlie Kirk are not people that had some information that they never had and they whatnot. We can all see certain X's, but problems occur not due to how X actually is, but how we define X, how we perceive X. And that way of me seeing other people seeing things that I have seen before, because we're basing things on similar sorts of principles and seeking of understanding and putting it through certain things, makes me think a lot of the people who are in disagreement here do have the ability to also see things like the other person is seeing, even though that doesn't mean you have to completely agree with what that person is saying. So that's the preamble for all this. Thank you all very much. I think I'm going to get my mug off of this. Might come back in later when I'm doing this, I think there will be the speed drawing of the Charlie Kirk Anyone But K shirt, and I'll probably be splicing in the pertinent links and videos and images and other things, I think, in there. But I will also keep in mind that there's going to be an audio version of this where people are just listening. So into that now. Myths that the man behind the myth believed. Perceiving X to be true does not make it a fact. I am areligious and an ANCAP, anarcho-capitalist sociopolitically. If you know what any of those terms mean and you know a little bit about Charlie Kirk, it should not surprise you that I have a lot of foundational principle premise disagreements with the things that he says in a lot of his videos. And this is one of the first examples I wanted to present. It's one of the first examples I found when I decided to start looking into Charlie Kirk. Was him at a university doing the same thing he was doing at Utah Valley University, talking to a young lady. And I'll just splice in here.
Hi, so I'm not technically, I don't go to UT, and I'm not the legal age to vote yet, and my parents are divorced, and both of my parents have separate political views. My mom's conservative, and my dad's a liberal, and my mom is always kind of pushing me to bring politics into my life. And I was wondering, A, should I care? And if I should, why? And which parent should I lean more towards?
Got it. So did you say mom's liberal?
Mom's conservative.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's the opposite I would have thought. Okay, yeah. So I see you have a shirt here that says, whom shall I send? Here I am, right?
Yes.
Which I love. That is the Hebrew word hineni, which appears many times throughout the scriptures. When Abraham, the binding of Isaac, Moses at the burning bush, the call of Isaiah, the call of Samuel. Every believer here in the audience, by the way, the most important thing is to bring Jesus into your life. Let me just make sure I say that. Most important thing. It's way more important than politics. It's the most important thing.
Amen.
And so I encourage every believer out here to learn what that word hineni means. It means, Lord, use me, send me. And I could tell you're probably going through a trial right now because your parents are separate and it's not easy. So the scriptures are very clear about this. Christianity has a heavy emphasis on honoring your parents. Mm-hmm. Now, to contrast that with the prior questioner, I don't think she's doing a good job of honoring her parents because she's accusing them of being in a cult.
Yeah.
This is very important, everybody. Even if your parents share values and views and a worldview that you do not have, you are biblically obligated to honor them, which means to spend time with them and to love on them and to go visit them. Even if they are wearing a Black Lives Matter and in this home that we have no hate and trans lives, you still go and spend time with your parents. Because if you are incapable, in this case, of honoring your earthly father, you will never honor your heavenly father. And it's very clear in the Ten Commandments, and then I'll get down to the specific advice. In the Ten Commandments, it is the only commandment, honor your mother and father so that you may live long in the land of which you are in. It is the only commandment that deals with a promise and your country. You will cease to have a strong country, America, if we do not have kids honoring their parents. Everyone out there, every day, you should call your parents on a weekly basis. I know college exists a lot of the times to separate children from the parents. They want to try to separate you from your upbringing. Your parents aren't cool. They don't understand you. They don't share your values. The closer that you stay with your parents, even though you have disagreements, the better you will be and your nation will be. Now,
that is pretty much who Charlie Kirk was to most of the people who are mourning him and cared for him right now. That right there. You can watch the entire thing and he gets into other things. And I strongly advocate for the non-aggression principle and strongly believe that peaceful parenting is part of how we'll have increased human flourishing and a reduction in the ghoulish behavior that I've mentioned before of the people celebrating this. And I'll discuss that more as we go on. And I think if we have that peaceful parenting, if we have that kind of thing, well-adjusted humans will be able to cooperate and coexist together amicably rather than resorting to physical violence and other forms of aggression when they fail to find an understanding. So as such, I may disagree with Kirk if we had the chance to speak about what sort of behavior a child should accept from their parents, since I expect he would have infinitely more importance put into what he perceived as direction from a supernatural and benevolent entity that I don't even think exists. But the sentiment and means of conversation that he had right here is one that I can support. He also was not advocating that the state government set policy and act in ways to force this daughter to associate with her parents. So it seems that it meant a lot to this young lady, and as you see, people were cheered, and as you might have known if you didn't know before from all the people that came out and supported him, This meant a lot to other people, and I expect we'll continue having many situations and examples where people he previously spoke to will come out and share their own thoughts about him. Like this one here, which is from Hunter Kozak, who was the last person who got to speak to Kirk in this format.
I don't know how to make this video. It's been a rough 24 hours. This last person to talk to Charlie Kirk, here's maybe a better vantage point of me. So I'll give you some background. I made a video maybe about a week or two ago, I think. I'll play clips so it's clear about what's going on.
Oh my God. So Charlie Kirk just said that the suspected Minneapolis school shooter was trans. First Nashville, now this. How many times makes a trend? Probably the only way to do this is to have an ungodly amount of time to parse through all of the 6,000 mass shootings that have ever happened in the history of America. I mean, Charlie's counting on the fact that only a psycho would do all that. Trans people are surprisingly and extremely nonviolent. Now, while I was scrolling Charlie Kirk's video, I noticed that he was touring America, and he was touring universities specifically. And one of these caught my eye because one of these is the university I'm currently going to.
Obviously, that university was UVU, where I currently go to school, and I'm getting a degree in mathematics in. I'm not going to show a video of what happened, mostly because I can barely watch it. But yeah, here's what I asked. I asked, do you know how many transgender Americans have been mass shooters over the last 10 years? Too many. I said the number's 5, counting or non-counting gang violence. Pop is heard. Shout out to CNN for fact-checking me and saying I'm right. First off, you sick fucking psychos that think this is the answer. It's not. I don't know what else to say. It's fucking not. It's awful, and a father doesn't have his kids anymore. Charlie had 2 kids and a wife. And like, not to make this about me, but I have 2 kids and a wife. And if my 1-year-old boy, like his 1-year-old boy, will grow up without memories of his dad, it's a tragedy. And it's hard to grapple with.
But other people will also get more chances to engage in civil discourse with people they disagree with and exchange words to settle disputes rather than resort to using the sword. Because forget the bluster, like Merkel, fuck yeah type stuff, and the bombing and the wars and the guns and whatnot. That is not what America is defined by. Like, this too is America. This individual was having this and had this happen and came out and had this talk. He was trying to communicate with this person. That is a majority of my American experience. And just objectively, if you just look at the amount of people who shoot versus the amount of people who talk, and America is exceptional in the talking aspect of it. And again, I certainly would disagree with Hunter on a lot, like defining what Project Ukraine is. He has that Ukrainian flag in his bio here on X. But I commend him for trying to choose those words. He went out there with speech. And even if we may disagree on which individuals choose violence for what reasons, he said he was trying to tell people that people on the political left are peaceful and they don't do that. And that's the same thing that I think in general, because words aren't violence, regardless of what people say. Silence isn't violence, regardless of what people say. Violence is violence. And generally, most of the people on the political left are peaceful, regardless of how you define the left. But words do have some power. They do have some influence. They do have some effect. Hunter may have seen that Charlie Kirk was going to show up at that university and thought, I'm going to go there and use my words, but we see what the individual who decided to take him down chose to use a sword rather than words. And one thing I think that Hunter and others could do is also avoid the collectivist identifications. He is not the left, but rather an individual that could be part of that grouping that is called the left. And I believe those jockeying to collectivize the shooter are also similarly mistaken if their intention in what they're doing is to increase human flourishing. I'm keeping in mind that some may literally think that simply talking like Kirk did was some sort of evil deed, even if they didn't choose to act on the belief that the assassin might have had. There's people on the left who would see that and like, there's no possible way I would even deign to speak with this person, deign to speak to somebody who would do that. Like, how dare he come out there? He should not be platformed. We should not even entertain that. And that is what a lot of people, a concerning amount of people in the United States of America and the rest of the world are still like. But I'm also cognizant that they don't realize, these people who are damning of Kirk that way, don't realize how for millions of people, if not billions, this is the sort of thing that they think is done for a greater good of society. Saying, I believe X, I live by X, I think X is good for society, so I'm going to go out to the greater public, especially people who disagree with me about X, and talk to them about X in public so other people can see this conversation about X. On to something about Kirk's and others' words and specifically actions that I may have disagreement with is the sort of political engagement that he thought he advocated for and he thought should be encouraged, and he was out there talking to people about that I actually thought was an actual thing. So this is something that he posted on September 10th, before I assume going to Utah Valley University, about iryna Zarutska's murder. And this was a post with Carolyn Levitt. It's on there. I'm not going to have the actual video here. He says, if we want things to change, it's 100% necessary to politicize the senseless murder of iryna Zarutska because it was politics that allowed a savage monster with 14 priors to be free on the streets to kill her. This is a situation where we agree on X as an issue, but have some slight disagreement on the Y causes of the X, or the proposals of Z to solve that X are different. I hadn't been following Charlie Kirk or Turning Point USA on September 10th, but I am following Turning Point USA now. And I was kind of trying to understand, am I okay with what kind of depiction would I have for iryna going on, with what kind of socio-political commentary about this X that I thought was significant enough for me to speak on once I had enough information about it. So I'm formulating, this is something that I had already thought this was definitely going to be part of it. So I'm formulating how to communicate that voting choices, which led to a policy that locally had this sort of DEI hires and believers, think that they had a mandate to wield the power of a welfare state system, which had this individual mingling with the general population despite 14 prior arrests, was the very same voting that led to an international policy set by global superpower believers who thought they had the mandate to wield the power of the warfare state system that set up, instigated, and maintained Project Ukraine, leading to iryna fleeing from there and ending up in that seat. I don't know what Hunter Kozak thinks about the judicial policy leading to the lack of incarceration or being in an insane asylum. The perpetrator is in a mental institution now, and that's just, it's almost in some odd way worse. Because yeah, I do think witnessing what Hunter did in person, seeing what we saw, many of us have seen, part of why I was avoiding seeing what happened to iryna is because some of these things do change you in a way, but how much different is this individual's mind now than it was on August 21st? So if there was an ability to put that sort of mindset in some sort of facility to keep him away from the general public, why hadn't it been done before? Considering what Hunter was signaling by putting the Ukraine flag in his bio, I would expect that if the topic came to Ukraine, he would be more for Trump funding and supporting Ukraine more than Charlie Kirk was, who was more focused on stop spending so much money in foreign things, specifically Ukraine, not so much in Israel. But that right there is not quite uncommon. There's a lot of cognitive dissonance going on with people, on some people who are pro-Ukraine, really against the Israel support, or some people that are for Israel, really against the Ukraine thing. That's something that also has been something that I might discuss in other times. It's something I've been noticing. The noticing has been goings-ons. So Kirk may have been sitting there in Utah talking to Hunter about things that involved policy that needed to be voted for or against. Both were using the relatively uniquely valued convention of freedom of speech that is specific and unique, repeating that again, to the people, political entity, and nation that make up the United States of America. So check this post out from Rolling Stone. The MAGA right says Charlie Kirk is a martyr for freedom of expression, but still want people to lose their jobs for criticizing his rhetoric. I am not MAGA right, even though I expect many may perceive me to be. And the Rolling Stone is also not some sort of bastion of investigative and truthful, factual, unbiased information, even though some people may perceive it to be. But I do think that Kirk is at the very least a martyr for freedom of expression. He was literally assassinated while exercising that. People were free to express themselves by engaging with him, challenge him, not listen, and discriminate against those who they think supported what he said. There was no issue that. He even had this policy that he said, the people who disagree with me the most, If you have a disagreement with me, you come to the front of the line. Yes, there was people who agreed with him. Yes, there were people who were going for advice for him, like that young lady from before. But if you had a disagreement with him, you would jump to the front of the line. That is one of the specific things where I still can't necessarily think of an equivalent of him on the political left. More on my evaluation of freedom of association when I get to reactions after his death, but back to the things that the man chose to say and do. Like the topic that Hunter was trying to address in their conversation, here is a post that he had from April 8th of 2025. Assassination culture is spreading on the left. 48% of liberals say it would be at least somewhat justified to murder Elon Musk. 55% said the same about Donald Trump. In California, activists are naming ballot measures after Luigi Mangione. The left is being whipped into a violent frenzy. Any setback, whether losing an election or losing a court case, justifies a maximally violent response. This is the natural outgrowth of left-wing protest culture tolerating violence and mayhem for years on end. The cowardice of local prosecutors and school officials have turned the left into a ticking time bomb. And then he links an article from Fox saying new bombshell study reveals assassination culture spreading on the left under President Trump. And there's a graph here with the justification and the murder. And with some of y'all that might have not known, might be international people. They also just might be people a lot more activated to politics that weren't aware of what was happening with Luigi Mangione, who was that one individual that went and cold-blooded murder, I think with a 3D printed gun, if I'm not mistaken, a CEO of a healthcare insurance company in New York City just walked up to him, popped in the back of the head, and I think one more when he was down, if I'm not mistaken. Could be wrong with that, don't quote me on that. But dude's a rather objectively handsome-looking guy, and there was people fawning over him. This is something I'm also familiar with. This is a more common thing. If women were really, in general, females of the human species and other animals were really against murder from the males of those species, we would not be here. We evolved in an environment where there was an expectation from men to be able to murder people. So I think even with some of these things, it's been, if I'm not mistaken, there might be more women cheering and dancing, at least from what I've seen, than they are the men cheering and dancing. What happened with Kirk, it's over 50-50. So that's one of the things that you shouldn't be so surprised about. If you are like me and believe there is a nature part with the nurture, there are some things where you're kind of naturally, due to your genes, predisposed to believing and thinking in certain ways that you're trained to due to your environment. But if you had a certain aspect of you that was more averse to accepting the males that actually ended the lives of the males that were already in your village or in competitions or had to fight and end other people's lives that were invading, and you're like, okay, I can't be with that person, that gives me the ick, the prehistoric ick. That was such a regular thing. Pretty much all the men you would deal with would actually be doing that. So the chances of those genes passing on are lesser than the ones of the people who are just like, yeah, okay, you did that person, you gave me a good enough reason for it. Okay, let's just get into the baby making. Back to the post here. So you can justifiably question if Kirk had considered the sourcing of this data, because even with some biases, certain limitations and considerations can affect data acquisitions. And more on this later, also in discussing the predictions and possibilities of who the shooter was and why he chose to do it. As I mentioned in the intro, I had that 24 to 48 hours later thing where I take some time and think before I talk and speak and make declarative statements or some things. But that's not what a lot of people do. We've seen that a lot of other people do a lot of things who think they can say stuff ahead of time. But it's clear to me that a large swath of regressive leftists, maybe half of those who were rejoicing about Kirk, have not actually heard of iryna at all. They're not really understanding. They didn't hear about the assault. It was intentionally not covered by certain people who feed into their infospheres. So they're not necessarily aware of how tense certain people were already when that happened. Like I said, I'm not MAGA-right. You've seen my ethnicity. You've seen my background and stuff. So it's not like I have like some sort of like, oh, that is exactly my sister. But at the same point, I could see that and think that could have been my sister. Like, it's kind of weird to me that people are like, because she is of a different race, there are people out there who are like, I cannot relate to that person just based off of that. That's a weird sort of place to be in. But then it's also the same kind of spot where someone's like, because she's of a particular race, it means a lot more to me than if it wasn't. So back to this thing. So as I mentioned, there's the people who haven't heard of that. That's, I think, at least half. At least half the people celebrating haven't heard of the iryna thing. They're not aware of that. As for the ones that had heard of it, it was mostly through a sanitized and spun narrative that they could still try to brush it off. Like, oh, it's just a thing. We don't really understand. Oh, people are over-exaggerating it. And most who actually saw it, I think they found it indefensible and chose to just be quiet about it and wait for the outrage to kind of end. And then they got this Charlie Kirk news. And for some of them, you could just notice that they were fervently latching onto this. Because with him, you have the usual white supremacist male angle to smear him with, and you have the gun control thing to blame. So that was something that was more familiar to them. When they kind of, I think some of them were like, okay, this looks really bad. This looks really bad. Okay, I'm so glad that guy's crazy. It's not like he's had this actual thing. And then that video had come out with the guy walking to the other part of the tram, and I wasn't sure if it was AI when I first heard it, because the guy's like, oh yeah, I got that white girl. Someone's like, hey, you're bleeding, you're losing blood. No one's concerned about him because the penknife was dripping so much blood because of what he did and juggling in the neck. And someone's like, you're dripping blood. And he's like, I got that white girl. I got that white girl. As I mentioned before, I think he was just more crazy and thinking like whatnot in his mind. Like it was more like an identification of I got that white girl, like I got that brown girl, I got that tall girl, I got that fat girl. It wasn't like I stabbed him because she was white. And then he's also heard saying she called me nigga. And I think with that kind of gets to the point where it's like there has been a culture, it has been a sort of feeling in the United States of America when there's a fight between black people who appear black or perceived to be black, and somebody who's fighting with them who's not, who's of a different race, and something happens. Some people are often like, well, what did he say? Did they call him a nigga? Like, just why would this person who is crazy think to use somebody calling him a word as some sort of defense or say it around him acting in a violent way? Is it because there's been some certain approval of like, if they say that word, then you're allowed to be violent? If Charlie Kirk had said certain words about certain people, then he's kind of instigating violence towards him. You see how some of these things are sort of related. Editing silence here. I got confirmation for the I Got That White Girl from Newsweek, the Post Millennial, and the New York Post, although nothing on the slur part. And Hindustan Times, don't know how credible that outlet is, was saying there's no audio on the actual CCTV from the Charlotte train. It's not beyond thinking that people would make this up to inflame things, because people do suck. You don't have to stab someone to suck. There's other people who suck in other ways. But on that Daily Caller video, there is also when people find out and they run down and they're like, oh my God, and they call 911. So there is that hope in humanity, and that is most of humanity. But back to this, they jumped on this. They jumped on this Kirk thing. And the rush to jump on this made them misconstrue who Kirk actually was and who he meant, and further ignore how significant iryna's murder was. And I'm not going to forget. Hundreds of millions of others won't either. And we will surely remember this every time these regressive ingrates try to lionize and rally around another incident involving a questionable character meeting a very reasonable and avoidable end, and use that as a tool to push whatever socio-political preference they may have. So what can make people who may seem relatively reasonable react to Kirk's murder, just brutal assassination, in the way that they have? He used words. I haven't seen any accusations from any of these people of him engaging in any physical violence yet, or actually directly physically abusing anyone. So here's another post from Charlie Kirk from September 10th, 2025. He was reposting something that was posted by Jillian Michaels of Van Jones, who was talking back in 2020. And this was a message Jones was delivering to Minneapolis white liberals who were objecting to what was going on when the riots, and mostly, as CNN said, the mostly peaceful riots, where the fires broke out in the background of one of the reporters who was doing it at that time. It hadn't escalated to that yet. It hadn't gone on for like weeks and weeks. We hadn't gotten to the situation where I'll get to that in a bit. So this is what Van Jones says.
Intentioned white person, even the most liberal, well-intentioned white person, has a virus in his or her brain that can be activated at an instant. And so what you're seeing now is a curtain falling away. And those of us who have been burdened by this every minute, every second of our entire lives, are fragile right now.
You can check out the thing for the full context where he compares people to KKK and saying, okay, we don't have to worry about those guys. Those guys are kind of clear. And that's also something that I was kind of thinking with this current situation, that even the KKK in general used to normally wear masks when they were celebrating and doing their violence and doing their action. But these people were just so confident in their power that they come out and celebrate this mask off moment and whatnot. I'm more concerned about the people who are still hiding, who were celebrating in their minds and just kind of like we're still out there. And I've seen these other people get kind of scorched earth on them and they're like, okay, we're not going to talk, but hey, they're still out there. But back to what Van Jones said. Did Iryna have a racist virus in her mind that could be activated? If, for example, she had walked in and looked up from her phone and seen that guy and decided to go sit someone else, and that had somehow gotten on camera, or one of the other black people had noticed and been like, she's racist, and kind of made a thing about it, and ended up not being stabbed, would that have been the racist virus activating in her mind? I mean, like, you've seen how I look in the whole situation, in the intro here. The other day, my Black Hagrid looking self was going on a walk. It was earlier today. It was earlier today, just coming back from my sister's. On a walk. No, it was 3 days ago. It's not important. But I was going for a walk, and in the estate I live in, there was this little kid, I think he was under 4 or 3 or 4. I can't really tell kids that young. He's probably 3 and 4, running and just having a happy time, seeing, that's kind of cute. The kid's running, he's joyous, he's running ahead of the adult that was walking with him. And then he kind of looks up and notices me, and he kind of gets shocked, and he runs back to the lady. I'm like, aw. And I do like a small wave at him, and the lady who was walking with him kind of feels a bit like, sorry. But was that a racist virus in this little kid's life? Or he's just like, that's a big dude with dreads, and people here don't have dreads or a beard, and they just don't look like that. I haven't seen this person before. I'm a little wary. No. Be careful. See certain things. Move. It's okay to be called racist. There are certain patterns you can kind of follow. These people were burning stuff down, and Van Jones was telling people they have a racist virus in their brain because this woman before had been walking her dog and she reacted in a certain way to this person because of the statistics that are actually there. And then the person turned out that was actually instigating and pushing things. So, but like that lady said, she lost her job, first of all. But don't call the cops. Like how you disagree with Charlie Kirk. Don't call the cops. Cops not the solution. You can just move. Lady could just move. The solution is. So coming back to this. So has a virus in mind. Iryna might have had a virus. So you remember the lengths that people like Van Jones went to combat a virus during the pandemic? If Iryna was at most having a latent version of this infection, then what would the prescription be to deal with the sort of virulent infestation that someone like Charlie Kirk had? No messenger RNA platform developed to racially transition away from this virus in your brain of white people, even the most well-intentioned white liberals that you now see how well-intentioned some of these people are. So maybe an alternative sort of treatment, like this one from Jezebel, which I found very early and has also made some rounds. And this is the article. We paid some Etsy witches to curse Charlie Kirk. If the far-right misogynist with a bad haircut wants to villainize independent women, Jezebel is more happy to be the hag of his nightmares. I am unsurprised by this because I was reminded of an experience I had when I was living in New York City where I attended a ceremony where witches were praying to put hexes on Donald Trump back in 2017. In that case, as I have been appreciative of Charlie Kirk, as I have been appreciative of the people coming out and dancing and showing us who they are, some parts of who they are, so we can get a better idea, I was also appreciative of these people freely doing it out in the open. And I got to find out by attending it that their intention was not to end Trump's life, but rather to have him perceive and then correct his ways. Perceive that what he's doing was wrong and find a better way to do that. So in a way, they're kind of using words. That hex that they're using is a form of words. A great hex or a prayer from Kirk, it's sort of in the same realm of things. People appealing to a power using words, a power that I don't agree with as a solution of using those words. I would prefer they have the direct conversation with him. And at least in the case of Kirk, he went and said, I'll pray for you, but also had conversations with people. I don't know, could any of these witches get a meeting with Trump? Would he ever sit down with some of them and I don't know, maybe he would. But regardless of whether I disagree with the power that they're appealing to, I am supportive and appreciative of people who use words rather than the sword. And I think many people like me are starting to realize that this is something that was very important to Kirk, and it's significant enough to talk about. Next section, speaking about the power of speech. So I've recently gotten back to making this audiovisual content and actually sharing posts on my blog. I think on the blog, I'm on 1,580 something days of daily posts. And for years, I was just posting every day, not sharing to everyone. So you just have all these posts like 0, 0, 0, 0 views, and working on some projects and getting my mind in a different, more productive, positive mindset. I got back to doing things, sharing things out, getting more connections. And I've kind of been wondering, a lot of my older stuff had a lot of socio-political stuff. So I was wondering, should I get back to that? Should I be focusing more on personal things and more things in the arts because I have an artistic background? And should I be focusing on things that I'm not seeing out there? Because I've been still watching other people. While I've been drafting this, as I mentioned, I'm still watching other people who are saying things that I observe with much bigger platforms, getting to the point where it's like, okay, this person is speaking, and then I'm like, okay, they're going to say this. I'm like finishing their sentence because of what they're saying. And I've even had friends I reconnected with who like have conversations about sociopolitical issues. And like, oh, you sound a lot like such and such person and such person. Do you listen to them? I was like, oh yeah, I started listening to them, but this is how I've been thinking for some time, as you can check out some of my own things. So X event would happen. I and others would see it and run into the Y mental algorithms, and out came the similar Z commentary. So maybe since we're already so alike, I'm kind of thinking with these large language models, is it fitting that AI tech can come in and do that in our stead? Like, I have like 3,800 or something total posts on my blog. If I had some large language model, could it learn from what I said and I just put in like all the information I've collected here about Charlie Kirk and iryna, zarutska, and then say, take these other posts and then feed something out? Would that be able to just chunk out something similar? I'm not quite sure, and I might look into that. But one thing I was certain that whatever I'm doing going forward is I need to include and focus on speaking on things from an individual standpoint, from my individual standpoint. Individualism is something that I value a lot, and I think collectivism is part of the negative aspects that I see in sociopolitics. And collectivism, I think, is a cancer to the health of the body politic. So as I go forward, I'll be trying to insert stories I think of involving experiences and thoughts that I have to add to this ongoing story of humanity on Spaceship Earth in current timeline. Also go to some things in the past, also project some to the future. But when I'm talking to current affairs, I think that's something that I'll be like, can I say something specific from my POV? So one recent thing that made me really think I should drop this political focus was finding that this Mark Halperin character, Mark Halperin, I will probably butcher that name as I mention him again later on. Had this project called Two-Way. So he would regularly come on and try to give a journalistic summary of issues, then have regular co-hosts Sean Spicer and Dan Turrentine that were open about their political biases to give different commentary about it from that point of view. And best of all, they would open it up to other people who could watch live and also call in, participate, and ask some questions and do all those things. So they had some regulars, they had some political operatives coming on, but mostly it was just regular Americans who reminded me a lot of my friends that I met in America and the people that I've seen and discussed with in social media and other platforms, just coming in and talking about their point of view. And of course, if you're on Two-Way, chances are you're more politically active than your average American, but also a lot of the people that I discuss on a regular basis from self-selecting as being more politically interested. Some of them are politically active, but a lot of my older friends, I just didn't get into politics as much, and we can be friends without talking about politics. So at the same point, we can also be friends if we disagree in politics. Okay, so, but kudos to all three of them and the callers for having me see how Spicer and Turrentine were conveying points of view from different sides of the spectrum, and they had sincere attempts to try and understand each other. And when that failed, they could at least keep that disagreement civil. You could tell, it seemed, at least I still think there's actual friendship between them. And of course, to this Charlie Kirk thing, it has strained, it has been very tense. Someone from Sean Spicer, and this is the thing that I think a lot of people also not realizing, is that a lot of people in the political, pliterati, Republican, right sort of sphere were actually close and knew him as a friend. And it's a bit different. This is, again, why I'm saying it's hard for me to find an equivalent of who Charlie Kirk was and what he meant on the political left. But I was seeing that if this was being done by Halperin and Spicer and Turrentine and these people on there, then certainly there was many other people in the United States of America doing it, other platforms, and he had plans to grow this. He still has plans to grow this, Halperin, I mean. And it's a testament to how I just hadn't been that much aware. Like, I knew of Charlie Kirk. You couldn't really be familiar with US politics in the last 10 years, especially when you're focusing on Trump and MAGA and that sort of sphere and the youth movement. Just in general, you couldn't really be aware that without knowing what Turning Point USA is and at least having some inkling of Charlie Kirk was running this thing. But I hadn't been listening to him directly. I think I had sussed out relatively early that there's the religious aspect, and that was a key thing he led with, and I'm not, I'm a-religious, so some people who lead with that kind of stuff kind of put me off in a way. So there's many reasons I hadn't actually listened to him actively, but it's a testament to how little I was listening to him and how much I was just focused on Halperin's actual thing with Two-Way, that I didn't know he had this other show called Next Up with Mark Halperin, where he talks to people one-on-one over like current affairs things. And he had Charlie Kirk on talking about crime, horrific Charlotte stabbing, and the wrong lessons about the Trump scandals. Now, I don't know when it was recorded, but it premiered on the day that Kirk unfortunately got shot. I think the one-on-one conversation talk that Halperin has is on the Megyn Kelly network, which is somebody who also left the mainstream media like Halperin, and now she's setting up this own network and putting people on. Emily Jashinsky is also someone else that I've posted a few on the actual blog that I have. Come see this thing. She has another thing. And regardless, so she has people who come on who have their own things, but they have shows on her network building that up. And she's also really good friends with Charlie Kirk. So it's just touched a lot of people. But this is just an example of how many people are out there creating this content. Genuine reporting. Yes, people are wear their bias on their sleeves, but I think that's better. And some more people on the left are starting to do this as well. They're realizing that there is a need for it. There's people who actually want commentary and information from honest actors in lieu of the processed narratives with not so secret agendas that you see on the mainstream media. There's some people who have left mainstream media, mostly on the political left, and then they're trying to do mainstream media sort of thing independently, and that's just not necessarily working. It might work enough for them to make a living, but not have the success that they had when they're on those larger, I guess not that much success, otherwise they'd still win their platforms, and platforms wouldn't be dying.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining special coverage here on Two-Way of the shooting of Charlie Kirk. We want this to be a place where people can have conversations like no other. And we're going to sample a lot of the coverage together, and we're going to have this conversation. It's going to be difficult for me. I interviewed Charlie yesterday. Yes. And he's everyone hopes he'll survive. But the video of the shooting suggests a pretty serious thing. The Associated Press says he's in critical condition. Shot at Utah Valley University at an event. He was doing his first event of his tour, only the latest of the tours he does around the country, speaking to young people. We'll show you some of my interview with him yesterday.
Back to Halperin, though. So he had a two-way show. He does this in a regular thing. He has a two-way, then he has another one later on in the day. But one of the regular things that he does in this is to remind the viewers that even though you may disagree with what is being said on the show by him, by Spicer, or by Turpentine, or anybody else that's calling in, you should kind of think that there's probably millions of Americans who share the beliefs of those people who are speaking there. So you agree with this. I agree with this. And I think that is one of the things that people are not necessarily understanding. There's one video in specific, someone's like, the thing about Kirk is that he wasn't that important. He is not martyr material. His passing will not mean anything. Like, what sort of mindset, what sort of infosphere, what sort of sheltered ass sort of existence that this person exists in, that she can't believe that any little thing, whatever she's heard of Kirk, she doesn't have anyone in her knowledge sphere to think that if these 2, 3, 4, 5 people know it, those 2, 3, 4, or 5 people might be representative of 100 people each. So already you're getting 500. And then if those 500 are representative of 100 people each, that already gets up to 5,000? I don't know, my math is horrible. So regardless, she's not able to just make that jump or calculation in mind because she just knows nobody that she knows cares or likes anything that she's heard that Charlie Kirk says, so she can't imagine somebody who actually does, let alone millions of people. J.D. Vance was a close friend of Kirk, though. Kirk was instrumental in getting Vance chosen as Trump's running mate for the 2024 election. Now, if you think Trump is literally Hitler, the return of Hitler, the second coming of Hitler, and it is well known that Kirk suggested J.D. Vance to be his vice president, who you have seen being very articulate, because this is what J.D. Vance has been doing, which again is something I see more on the political right, going into platforms and locations. This could also just because more platforms and locations in the mainstream media are on the political left, even though people themselves might not consider CNN and MSNBC central. But regardless, so they go out and he talks, and you've seen him being very articulate in pushing Trump's message and agenda. And you hear that Trump credited Kirk and Turning Point USA for getting the youth to sign up. This is the youth. This is not the older, it's a party of the old white men. And you hear Fox and you check the statistics, and Fox's average viewer is like in their 60s. Instead of like, the more educated, younger people are for the youth, so we're going to take it over. So you see things trending to the right. And remember, the people who just recently saw an advert that was a remake of some advert back in the 90s with Brooke Shields or something, which was a big questionable because he was like underage at that time. But she had this advert about I have great genes and whatnot back then. So American Eagle comes back now with Sydney Sweeney, and she says, I have great genes. So it's a remake of that ad in the past, playing on jeans, Jeans. American Eagle, the jeans, he's wearing a jean suit, and I have good genes, and they're referring to that, and people who think that it's literal Nazi propaganda. And remember, I will mention this now, the common thing, they literally mean figuratively, especially Americans, especially when about politics, and the inverse also, they figuratively mean literally. Some things you might think they're kidding on, they literally mean, but I'm not meaning that way. I'm talking about, okay, back to the thing. Some people who literally thought that a remake of a jeans ad that had a play on word on jeans was literally Nazi propaganda. Whatever they defined as Nazi in their mind, that was a version of Nazi propaganda. Then what would they think of what Kirk was saying and doing? Who would he be in their mindset? That means that he seems like a sort of Joseph Goebbels, except much younger, and raising this MAGA youth that would usher in the fascist empire of the USA with the never-ending Giotas MAGA right thing, Reich or whatnot, where leftists had said this. Many prominent people have been warning that there would never be any more elections. And think about how important and valuable voting is to these collectivist leftist regressives. Like Cenk Uygur, who will come up later. Of course, they would celebrate. Why wouldn't they celebrate if this person was actually had his life taken? But what if you'd actually looked into who Kirk was, taken the time to actually look into it? And you don't have to steel yourself to venture into Fox News and find sometimes. No, he was all over the place. He would go to universities. You could go on YouTube and find him. He would go to other people's shows. He would have people come on his shows. He was a regular speaker. If you actually were interested and concerned enough in what he was saying, you could actually go out there and talk to him physically, or find him talking to actual physical people about a wide range of topics. And here there's this William Wolf post that says, this gets even worse when you consider that Charlie Kirk, more than anybody else on the American right or left, built his platform making a good faith effort to model civil political discourse and debate in the public square. His entire project was built on reaching across. And J.D. Vance reposted this with a saying that this is such a good point. If you actually watch Charlie's events as opposed to the fake summaries, they are one of the few places with open and honest dialogue between the left and right. He would answer any question and talk to everyone. Again, forget that whole the left is looking for a Joe Rogan of the left. Like Joe Rogan was on the left, and then now the overturned window kind of moved. But regardless, that is not duplicable, and I'm not sure if what Charlie Kirk did was either. But what is the equivalent on the left? Maybe AOC Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She might fit somewhat, but some of y'all might not know, but she auditioned for her position. She's more of an actor, and she's already in political office. She's a Congress member, and she hasn't had that much success in proposing or passing any policy, or she doesn't really have that much weight throwing her support behind other candidates and proposals. So I don't know. There's definitely a grooming action going on with the Democratic Party, but I think her youth, she is relatively young, but her accessibility is more on TikTok and Instagram Lives, preaching to the choir rather than touring around in person to places she knows will have folk who disagree with them. And I think that's something that politicians should do. But I think with what happened to Kirk, people are going to climb up and do that even less than they already did little in the amount that they have been doing it. And some really think that AOC would be a good presidential candidate. I'm like, please run her. I remember when Mom Donnie was coming out, I was like, please run Mom Donnie too. But then I found out Mom Donnie was born in Uganda, so he actually can't run. He doesn't qualify with the age thing, with the location thing. You have to be naturally born citizen of the United States of America. But even though the Dems bench was already so lacking in 2020 that they needed an unprecedented pandemic to fortify an old white male that had been nothing but a politician for his whole life into office with one Joseph Robinette Biden, then they spent 4 years stage managing that administration because Joseph Robinette Biden was just, he was Biden. He was Sleepy Joe, as Trump had said, accurately. They were so involved with that they couldn't even develop a legit candidate in those 4 years, and then bungled the whole thing where Biden was like, I'm going to hang on anyway. I don't know, did Biden really say that? Or were the people who were profiting from using Biden, from puppeteering Biden in whatever sense, decided we're not going to let him drop out? Regardless, they tried to foist Kamala Harris on us after they just bungled that whole thing and that whole worst debate ever, or probably any sort of debate, not just political debate, where that performance was just, they just couldn't pull the lie anymore. The wool just couldn't be put off their eyes. And it's like, what are we going to do? We're going to foist Kamala Harris on the public. Even though Kamala Harris had already shown that she could not win in her own constituency when she ran, which is California, when she ran back in 2016 for their primary, and she lost that. I think she was like third or something, and then she was like, I'm out of this. She was just polling so badly that she decided, I think she was the first of the major candidates to drop out during that cycle. But it wasn't before this one indelible thing, there's a link that I might put it on the screen, where she was trying this rainbow pride jacket or whatever it is tagged this. I don't know if it was necessarily a pride jacket, but it was just like Technicolor coat sort of thing. And she's in this room cackling with all these other, I think they're mostly female, not just staffers, but I think actual press people. Supposedly real, honest, mainstream media, MSM reporters. And they were like, yeah, so this is like the person, she's so cool, she's so nice. He was a darling of the media. But the actual rank and file Democrat were like, we're not voting for this person. But yeah, so she was put in anyway. More on that later. But they're thinking, hey, let's just run a younger version. And maybe, and I think to AOC's testament, she would probably actually win her constituency. She would probably run and win New York in the primary and some other states. And why is this? Because even though AOC may have auditioned for that position as this on the fringe, pulling in these people that are on the outskirts, pulling in this new blood to the party, I'm a democratic socialist, I'm this firebrand. Once she's been in office, like the rest of the squad, one of them will come up later, at least the ones who are remaining, she has been slowly and surely being kited back to the center. Because if you ask the opinion about what happened with Charlie Kirk to, let's say, Nancy Pelosi, Kamala Harris, or some rando Democrat congresswoman from some safe district in a blue state that hasn't had a credible Republican challenger in decades about what happened around Kirk, they would say much of the same of what AOC said here. She's a political actor, very aware of the political stage that she's on, so of course she politicized it. Like Kirk said, it's okay to politicize the death of Iryna. Like other people on the political right, it's not just the United States of America, it's not just left or right, this is a common thing, this is what people do in politics, politicize things. They do it to a varied level of ability, like in any other pursuit that humans have. Like, you can compare what Vice President Vance just did. I think today, as I'm recording this, he just hosted Charlie Kirk's podcast, which is a regular podcast that he put on, and he had a wide range of officials and personalities of the political right, and they politicized it, and they did a masterful job of it. I'm like, yeah, this is a pretty good production you're putting on here for considering how fast they probably put on. They're already fundraising off of it. Some people are like, how dare they fundraise? Come right on here. Like, that is not something that all politicians do, is fundraise over like some of the worst of the things that happen. At least it's not as bad as they do here in Kenya, where it's like, this might happen now at Charlie Kirk's funeral. But here it's like in the village, in the countryside, you'll just have like a regular funeral of like somebody who lived in there. And then a politician would show up because he knows a lot of the village people would come to the funeral, and then people will be giving speeches about this person's life, and the politician will get up and give some political speech, even though he might have not actually known the person, and he's pitching all these things and whatnot. It's gotten to the point where like people in the village, in the countryside, in the rural areas have to explicitly say, even here in the cities, have to explicitly say, like, if you're going to come up and be a politician on this thing, do not give political speeches. But back to Kirk. Simply politicizing it does not mean you don't care about the life that was lost and other situations when that happens. But there are some people who don't care. And many on the left are kind of like me, who already knew what many of us have found out in the last few days, that something is very wrong with the people on their team. I think even with them, like they're exposed to AOC and they think AOC is fringe. So they see what AOC says with her Nancy Pelosi-ish gun control pivot to the conversation and think, yeah, that's the fringe. That's not your fringe. Mark Halperin is one of those people, and he posted this on September 13th. For the first day, I refused to believe that anyone was actually going on social media to celebrate Charlie's murder. Then I realized there was in fact some of it, but I assumed it was a very small amount. Now I see how naive I was. What's wrong with someone who would do that? And that's the key part here. It's not that this is coming from the terminally online edgelords or the brightly haired, multi-pierced and tatted up hashtag-tivists. This is a word that I've written several times, but saying it is different. It was average looking teachers, doctors, public to private sector, service industry to self-employed, self-identified people of faith to secular humanists. This was just average people that normal people deal with in their normal day-to-day, normal activities that were out clearly cheering an assassination that some of them had unfortunately had burned into their recent short-term memory and probably won't leave for some time. I even watched this guy, Comics Matter, our boy Zach. He was in the military and he was talking about how he's seen military stuff that's just horrible, that thought was, this is bad. Like he had a friend of his call him like, yo, don't watch that video. And then he watched the video and was like, oh man, this is like the worst thing I've seen. And he's seen people in a military situation getting murked. He's explaining just how horrific this is. It's different. And I kind of get, if you're in that sort of mindset, I get why some people don't really seem to understand the equivocation of saying you were okay with this or you posted a meme about this is not quite the same when it happens with this. But I think I probably have a separate video talking about iryna's murder. And I'll talk about my point of view on what's happening with the reaction, specifically with that and the equivocations that are going on. So enough of those unhinged examples. You can find them. And as I mentioned, I'll touch on them later. So to the next section. The words those who hate Kirk hated. In this section, I'm going to focus more on some of the more, I'd say, reasonable, substantial objections to who Kirk was. Of course, as I mentioned before, nobody's been accusing him of physical violence, saying, oh, we should fight fire with fire because he did this physical thing to this person. But they have these people saying like his words were so incendiary that violence is not unexpected. It's not shocking that this happens from these people. Here is one of the regular versions I've seen gone around about specifically Charlie Kirk being very angry. And this is from Canada Hates Trump saying, as you watch Charlie Kirk spew hatred and racism, remember, Trump ordered U.S. flags lowered for him, yet vehemently opposed lowering them for President Jimmy Carter. Only in Trump's America.
I live like a capitalist every single day, Cenk. I live as a capitalist, okay? I live what I believe. No. What do? I get charity every single year. Hold on. What's my salary? Less than it.
Charlie, take a seat.
Come on, Cenk, let's go.
Charlie,
I live like a capitalist every single day, Cenk.
And of all the videos they could post, of all the things that he's talked, why would they post this video? He is having a debate with Hassan Piker, who is a very famous Twitch streamer, the most famous Twitch streamer, makes him the most money, #1 Twitch streamer. And he happens to be somebody who was working with the Young Turks, which is a group of more left-leaning things, set up news independent channel set up by Cenk Uygur. Remember that name, Cenk Uygur, who is his uncle, and Anna Kasparian and a bunch of other people. Jimmy Dore, who you may have heard of, who used to be on there, then he kind of left for them. So they've had a lot of people who left the Young Turks and been relatively successful and known. Even Dave Rubin, who happens to be a homosexual, has a husband, adopted kids, really good friends with Charlie Kirk, has been over to Charlie Kirk's place for dinner. And they had some confrontation on the Piers Morgan show, who has also taken like the internet blood sports sort of thing that used to happen in certain aspects of the internet, which are more of those like far right leaning sort of people that some people think Charlie Kirk was. But regardless, so they have this thing. He's having this debate with Hassan Piker. Hassan Piker was supposed to have a debate with him in 2 weeks. Of course, it's not going to happen. But anyway, so they were having a debate some time back, and this debate is on there. You can find it. Charlie Kirk was kind of crushing him on the debate from my estimation and most of the people's estimations. But regardless, something came up talking about socialism and the amount of money, and Charlie Kirk was like, Hassan, why don't you mention how much you were making in your money? You're making all this money. You're a champagne socialist. Not in these words exactly, talking about the thing. And then Cenk Uygur starts yelling from the actual crowd. So Charlie Kirk gets up and he's like, yeah, how about you, Cenk? Be quiet, Cenk. Like, how about she's the one who brought it up. I live by a capitalist. I give to charity. So shut up, Cenk. So these people are thinking that what he was saying was a slur, when his name is actually Cenk Uygur. Like, if he's had all these things, why would you not actually find one of those many examples of him being hateful if they keep doing these same videos? And that's one of the things that you'll see that in this section, I highlighted a few things that happen repeatedly and repeatedly. If you consider the hundreds and thousands of video, of hours of him probably speaking, why do they keep going to these small examples and not just taking those small examples, but twisting them in these sort of obvious ways that you'll see that they're doing? And I think there's a part of this because you look at the people they've actually backed up, the people they've defended, the people they've come to their defense, the people that they've lionized, and those people are questionable characters. So I think there's a part of them who want to bring Kirk down in that sense. Like, this person Ace Smart, so I just found out you're supposed to be talking about these people in Chicago talking bad about, like, oh yeah, Trump, like, yeah, you think you can bring the National Guard here? Oh, we got the clips, and he's just talking about how, like, they would just take him out. And these kids are kind of young. They haven't heard that Outcast line from Andrew 3000 in Babylon, where he's like, we out here talking about gats, nigga. They made them gats. They got them shit out, blow it out back from where they stay at. Like, that's before drones. That's before all this tech. So Ace Hayder was talking about that. Or no, Ace Smarts. So Ace Smarts has this video where he's just talking about how with the stabber of iryna, they opened a GoFundMe for him, and gladly, luckily, even GoFundMe was like, this is a bit too much, so we're going to take it down. So I'm not going to focus on those inane people, but let's get back to these people who are making some sort of sensible sort of commentary on what's going on, explaining. And I'll highlight a few examples from the Black community in the United States of America, or what I think is a Black community in these situations, talking about why they're somewhat apathetic and not participatory in defending him. I haven't seen too many Black people outright celebrating this, some of them, but it's a predominantly white country, so majority of these situations you will see white people doing all the things that are possibly done to be done in general. Okay, so here, this is from New Afrikaan Liberated Territory resident. I don't know anybody in Africa who spells Africa or African with a K, but this is an affectation and a thing done outside of Africa, mostly. So this is posted a repost of Honorable Number 9 saying, these idiots just elevated Charlie Kirk to a level of MLK, Martin Luther King. They just made him a martyr, historic. So this is somebody who's saying that this is going to, and there are some parallels in some ways to the people who cared about him. Like I'm saying, if you didn't really care about what MLK was doing to begin with, you probably didn't care that much about when he died. If you cared about what Charlie Kirk was doing to begin with, you probably cared in a sort of similar sort of way about him when he has died. These people don't get this. So the New Afrikaan Liberated Territory resident said, these idiots really think that King is revered because of how he died, rather than the life that he lived and the specific struggle he was involved with when he was murdered. Again, this is something that this person is not plugged into the right. They actually don't realize that that's why they're elevating, because for some people, that was the same. Some people, whether you believe it or not, actually do think white America is under assail from this new world order, globalized, rules-based order, and many other things going on there. They might be right, they might be wrong. I kind of have some suspicions with that, because you still look all over the world and it's still a lot of white people having a lot of power, especially in predominantly white countries. Most of these things that are saying are negative towards the community, these immigrations and all these policies are still done by white people. In general, most of the governments, most of the people in positions of power still have to at least accept or be like, Christianity is a thing that I believe in, or I'm more Christian. Think about how much more Donald Trump has adopted Christianity even before surviving the actual attempt at his life. That was the thing that he was signaling. And then you look at Trump before he actually ran for political office, how open was he about Christianity? So I think there's still a signaling or an accepting of that, or platforming where they're in there. So I'm not quite on board with all that specifically attacking white Christian American, white Christian Westerners in that sense. I'm not necessarily on board with that, but I realize millions of people are, and I can relate to where they're coming from, and I can kind of see where they're talking about this. And also when it comes to talking about the life that he lived, some people also pointed out that the character of the two, when it comes to their personal relationships, Charlie Kirk is in a lot better of a light than Martin Luther King Jr. was. So that's someone who's coming a bit more sensible. Is not out there just being stuff. Yes, he's calling people idiots. So kind of wonder when you get so quick with insulting people. But there are more moderate and reasonable people out there. So here is from Timothy Benson and the Hungry Black Man, who give what I think is an example of a moderate, more reasoned point of view of why some in the black community are the way they are. And I say this in part because of what they presented, what I'm aware of in just being a socio-political fanatic, and also the two people that I got these from. One of them just posted online, and I saw it on Facebook, and the other one was a friend of mine who I mentioned in the other video I said about the 24 to 48 hours later, where we've had regular political conversations about different topics, especially when it comes down to race. I asked them what they thought about it. They haven't gotten back to me yet. They have different time schedules, they have different jobs and things like that, so maybe it's not just them being on the political left and not wanting to talk about this, but it's just time schedules. Regardless, here is the first one from Hungry Black Man. This is not eulogy flattery, this is memory. We remember the things he said about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. MLK was awful. He's not a good person. We remember his calculation on gun violence. I think it's worth ... some gun deaths every single year so that we can have the Second Amendment to protect our God-given rights. This is a prudent deal. It is rational. End quote. These are not the words of healing, but not the words of unity, and yet they too are part of the ledger that he leaves behind. And that's it for the Hungry Black Man quote. With Martin Luther King Jr., he is a Churchillian figure to some. If you question his character, it's like, for devout Christians, it's like blasphemy. You can't do that, because for American black people, American descendants of slaves, I think there are a specific tribe that's in there, because due to how they got there, through the slavery, the chattel slavery, they're not like some peoples who continue to go back and forth to their countries of origin and were slowly Americanized into this thing. No, it was just there. It was developed there because they were cut off from the roots. And I think that's why that show, now thinking about that show, Roots, is like really sensible, is really poignant name, because that is the roots of the people that we call black people, that I think black people are, which is also why I can never be a black person, because I'm not an American descendant of slaves, even though some people might identify me as black. And specifically, I can never be politically black because of the collectivist leftist ideations that politically black people have. And on that, let's go on to Timothy Benson. Here's the start. When Kirk joked, quote, ironically, end quote, he insisted that school shootings might have to be necessary to preserve the Second Amendment. There were no calls for restraint. When he poured contempt on black professionals, there were no bipartisan statements urging him to moderate. But the moment he fell to an assassin's bullet, suddenly civility became sacred. Suddenly, both parties discovered their appetite for lower temperatures and calmer words. I cannot help but hear the hypocrisy in that call. For in America, rhetoric is never, quote, too hot, unquote, when it burns black lives. It is only too hot when it burns a white man. That's it for Benson. So he thought about this, drafted it, and then decided to type up, quote, when Kirk joked, quote, ironically, end quote, he insisted that school shootings might have to be necessary to preserve the Second Amendment. There were no calls for restraint, end quote. That's what he wrote. I'm quoting him here. This is literally what they chose to type up and present, which will come in important later. But for now, here is the question and answer in full that Kirk was asked in 2023 that referenced the Covington Catholic school shooting that had recently happened at that time. I'm going to play the whole thing here. I think it's important.
How's it going, Charlie? I'm Austin. I just had a question related to Second Amendment rights. We saw the shooting that happened recently, and a lot of people are upset. But I'm seeing people argue for the other side that they want to take our Second Amendment or rights away. How do we convince them that it's important to have the right to defend ourselves and all that good stuff?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you. So I'm a big Second Amendment fan, but I think most politicians are cowards when it comes to defending why we have a Second Amendment. This is why I would not be a good politician, or maybe I would, I don't know, but because I actually speak my mind. The Second Amendment is not about hunting. I love hunting. The Second Amendment is not even about personal defense. That is important. The Second Amendment is there, God forbid, so that you can defend yourself against a tyrannical government.
Come on.
And if that talk scares you, Wow, that's radical, Charlie. I don't know about that. Well, then you have not really read any of the literature of our founding fathers.
Yep.
Number two, you've not read any 20th century history. You're just living in Narnia. By the way, if you were actually living in Narnia, you would be wiser than wherever you're living, because C.S. Lewis was really smart. So I don't know what alternative universe you're living in.
Yep.
You just don't want to face reality that governments tend to get tyrannical, and that if people need an ability to protect themselves and their communities and their families. Now, we must also be real. We must be honest with the population. Having an armed citizenry comes with a price.
Wow.
And that is part of liberty.
Wow.
Driving comes with a price. 50,000 people die on the road every year.
Wow.
That's a price. You get rid of driving, you'd have 50,000 less auto fatalities. But we have decided that the benefit of driving, speed, accessibility, mobility, having products, services, is worth the cost of 50,000 people dying on the road.
Wow.
So we need to be very clear that you're not going to get gun deaths to zero. It will not happen.
Right.
You can significantly reduce them through having more fathers in the home,
Yes.
by having more armed guards in front of schools. We should have an honest and clear reductionist view of gun violence, but we should not have a utopian one. You will never live in a society when you have an armed citizenry and you won't have a single gun death. That is nonsense. It's drivel. Wow. But I think it's worth it. I think it's worth to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year, so that we can have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights. That is a prudent deal. It is rational. Nobody talks like this. They live in a complete alternate universe.
Sure.
So then how do you reduce? Very simple. People say, oh, Charlie, how do you stop school shootings? I don't know. How did we stop shootings at baseball games? Because we have armed guards outside of baseball games. That's why. How did we stop all the shootings at airports? We have armed guards outside of airports. How do we stop all the shootings at banks? We have armed guards outside of banks.
Yes.
How do we stop all the shootings at gun shows? Notice there's not a lot of mass shootings at gun shows. There's all these guns because everyone's armed. If our money and our sporting events and our airplanes
Wow.
have armed guards, why don't our children?
The Second Amendment is there, God forbid, so that you can defend yourself from a tyrannical government, end quote. Was Kirk joking? There may have been no explicit call for restraint, but did he give proposals of how to prevent and mitigate any future shootings? Why would this not be mentioned? Why would he include a picture of George Wallace with a Confederate flag behind him to compare it to Kirk, listing Wallace as the segregationist governor and not once mentioning that he was a Democrat, and not just any Democrat, but that he was the longest serving Democrat governor, not only of Alabama, but the whole party at the time of his assassination. And that seems intentional, but as I said, read what these two men posted. Go to the actual post that I have here in the links. Check out the Facebook post up there. Look at the comments. Look at the people supporting. Look at the people saying this guy's doing an amazing job. Look at the people saying that they put it exactly how the people are thinking. As Halperin said, and as he reminds his viewers and listeners, what may be said, even though you might disagree with it, may be reflective of what millions of other Americans and people believe to be true. And you can just look at what happened in DC. Look at how it's been secured. I don't know what's going to happen once they leave, but think about these other places. If people tried to enslave black people like they did back in the times of chattel slavery, do you think they'd be able to do it now? Or wouldn't they be enough people able to resist what happened? Sure, you can say, like the National Guard, if they had been there on January 6th, they would have secured the place and prevented the actual invasion. But if those people had actually planned, let's say there was like 1% of the people who were actually there decided to be armed and actually tried to coup the government, they would have reached the politicians. They would have gotten there. Politicians are not currently petitioning the Trump government for better security because they actually think nobody can reach out and touch them. You look at the cities, look at Chirac, which is actually called that by the people that are actually in there. Look at all the deaths that actually pass on. These people talking about how, oh, the white public doesn't care when the deaths are burnt by the people. How, I don't, like, okay, this is what I'm saying. Someone like Benson, someone like Hungry Black Man, maybe they do talk about all the people being shot. 50 people during a week being shot in Chicago with like 10 of them dying. Maybe they do talk about that. Maybe they are posting about that. Maybe they are going and demanding that those Democrat-run places with increasingly black and female-held governments, when you talk about the police who are getting increasingly militarized, maybe they're saying those people need to do better. But no, they're talking about defund the police. And I think there is some truth to that, because I think people realize that it's not going to be the police that's actually going to do this. You need people like Maj Toure of Black Guns Matter, who's doing a great job of actually posting videos of people who went and helped Iryna as she was bleeding out, which was unfortunately too late. But they noticed and went and helped her when people were like, nobody helped her. No, people were helping her. But Maj Toure is that kind of person. He's someone who says, I am a solutionary. He calls his people who follow him solutionaries, where he's going out there and training people, Black Guns Matter, training citizens to arm themselves with legal weapons and say, you're the ones who are going to have to protect and secure your places. Like, forget how hunting would change if the deer could shoot back. What if you were in a situation where you went into the woods to hunt and the trees, rocks, grass, bugs, rivers, and other things in the woods could shoot at you while you're taking aim at the deer? That would change things completely. The calculations would go. Like, sure, some utter idiotic and psychopathic people who are suicidal would still engage in gunplay in the hood and these other places, but generally, it would be greatly reduced. And that's what Kirk was trying to get at, but some people just can't seem to get that. But I think there are people who can. I think there's people who would listen to what Kirk said and get what he was getting at, even if they don't agree with what he was saying, and not be like, okay, he didn't deserve that off of this. He wasn't belittling that kind of situation and just being a statistic in this. I don't know if Benson and Hungry Man are one of those people. And just like I objected to Kirk saying we need to vote and we need to support better politicians in better places, I also don't think these people should support better policy from the state, even though that is what the Black community tends to do. We just need to have our politicians in there so they can have policies through the state that focus on the Black community. That's what we need to do. So they don't want to talk about it. They would assiduously avoid mentioning that the very government that they're saying we should support, as I mentioned with George Wallace and the parties did not switch, that enslaved them and their ancestors, they don't want to mention that. And the Democrats want to keep them on that democratic plantation. There's people talking about, oh, these people are just like house slaves because these people on the Republican side and like they're showing that they were friends with Charlie Kirk and whatnot. When you have the Congressional Black Caucus, which is Black Congress people, is Ilhan Omar in there? Because like I said, I don't consider myself Black. I think Black is like ADOS. But there is the difference between politically Black and racially Black. And I think that's what they do here, because it's members from the House of Representatives and the Senate who are Black, and they actively discriminate against Republicans who want to join. But then tell me about how it's the Republicans who are saying we're going to sate them by letting them have a seat in the House. We'll get back to Kirk on Black politicians, but first is a video here of him having a conversation with a young Black male about things that the Black male thinks Kirk has said about the Black community, Black culture. And I'm not sure about his personal life, but you can see that he was a little unprepared to actually be able to convey his thoughts. This is a common thing. I've taken some time in doing these kind of speaking and recordings and videos where I understand the tension people have in public speaking.
Right. So when segregation ended, right, Black people, or when slavery ended, actually, Black people were just forced wherever, right? So they had nowhere to go. And then there was laws put in place to put them into prison. And after...
Okay. It's okay. No. What's your name? Guys, what's your name? Jackson. It takes a lot of courage to come up here.
Yeah, no,
Let's just take a deep breath. Okay, I'm not here to pick on you, and I appreciate it. No, it's okay. I know that this can be very intimidating getting into a crowd like this, so just take a deep breath. Let me make your argument. I'm going to make your argument for you, and I'm going to tell you why I think it's wrong. Okay?
Okay, yeah.
Is that fair?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so the argument that is being made, that you want to make, is that there's legacies of injustice.
Yes.
And that those legacies impact one generation after the other, and when those things get handed down, you have what is a system or a systemic issue that isn't just isolated in 2024. So the argument that you're making is that what happened in 1954 does impact 2024 of decade after decade after decade. Let me tell you my response to that. Of course, there is some truth to that. However, every culture, every person in this audience can point to issues that families or generations prior had that were able to overcome. So the question is, why is it that Black America is one of the only populations, that and Native American populations, that have not been able to overcome such evil, horrors, and injustices? Here's my perspective, and I want to hear what you have to say. is that the number one way to keep people out of poverty, lower the crime rate, and have a better society is whether or not you have a mom and a dad around. Would we agree that's an ideal? Yeah? Cool.
Yeah.
And so what happened in 1964 is that 25% of black youth were raised by a single mom. Today, it's nearly 75%, about 70%. So that means that 1 in 4 black kids will have a father around. Only 1 in 4. That's the number one issue happening in the country, and it's not because of systemic racism. I'd like to hear what you have to say about that.
Okay, so I think I misjudged you at first. Like, when you brought up the 1350 stat, I had like just assumed that it was like inherently like eugenics based, kind of, you know. So, and that's where mine came from. Like, I think we are on the same page that like we know what the problem is, and that's what I mean. Like,
no,
the
and
education.
Thank you for saying that, because I think we actually have a lot more in common in this country than the media would ever believe.
No, definitely, right? And like what my point was, I was trying to say is, I don't think that we're doing enough to help these black communities catch up. Whereas like they're underfunded and they're not, and they're over policed, and there's just these factors that are contributing to, like you said, these single parent households.
Yeah,
like,
so we're not going to agree on this. This is where we'll disagree.
Kirk displays another one of his admirable traits that is rather rare, but that's part of what makes it so much more valuable, is the ability to argue from the point of view of the people that you're engaging in conversation and debate with. That whole steel manning thing. Now, an unfortunate tactic that you find in regressives, I just call them regressives of any sort, but we can talk about black activists or feminists. You have them say that as a black person, you gotta be black, man. You ain't gonna know what it's like to be black unless in America, unless you've been black. Unless you walk up my shoes, you ain't gonna know what it's like to be like unless you're in these Timbs. It's kind of racist saying the Timbs, but people still wear Timbs. Not sure, Timberlands. Anyway, and then the women are like, as a feminist, unless you're a woman, then you're never really gonna know what it's like to be a woman in this patriarchal society. You just can never know that. But then you'll have situations where, let's say, a black feminist will regularly say this and talk about their plight and claim that a male white person can never see what they see. So you have to be black, you have to be a woman to know what they see, but they can speak about what a white male can see. You see where these things kind of fall apart already. And that leads to just, Van Jones got like $100 million from I don't know what kind of billionaire or foundation gave him this to be out there and speak on things. He's platformed on CNN, which is an international reach. Imagine if right now, as people are just pilfering around to find things about Kirk to besmirch his character, they had found this video, and Charlie Kirk's answer was that black people have a virus in their mind that leads to their culture of violence and leaving them having a lack of the ability to pair bond successfully. That's why so many of them have single mother childhoods. What would the reaction be? That's some of this collectivist filth stuff. Rather, he goes on more towards the individualist part that appeals to me and grants black people agency and says, y'all did better when you were closer to a situation that was more harmful to just the general issues that you guys were going through. And you still managed to have lower crime, higher levels of just two-parent households, and you had a lot. Yes, sure, you're starting from a lower place, so you could grow faster, but the trajectory that you were going in was amazing, and then something happened and that dropped. Some of you out there might be saying, oh, who are you, man? You just some Kenyan speaking out there. What you speaking on these black issues? Like, you Africans just hate black people. You just speaking bad on black people and whatnot. Like, would you guys say the same thing? Like, say that because I am a Luya, I can only speak of Luya things here in Kenya. I don't know much about the Luya stuff here in Kenya. Let me tell you that to begin with. But I happen to be Luya. I can't change that. So by that fact, by that genetic thing, by that happenstance of birth, does it mean that I can't care about those who consider Kirk to be one of their tribe because he may have said something unflattering about Barack Obama's dad, who is from the neighboring Luo tribe to the Luya tribe? No, I can represent my point of view and try to theorize and propose what others may have been thinking to try to achieve some understanding without being those people. Which is also hinting at another thing that I've gone when people are talking about he doesn't like empathy and he prefers sympathy because he's just saying it's like a made-up term and you can't really feel what somebody else is feeling because you're not actually them. but you can sympathize with them. And I kind of agree with that because I think you can sympathize with all our fellow Earthlings, be they human or not. But on to another example here, which I think is from a black woman. And she just posts, "Fuck him." And this is the quote. And this quote is quite something that I've noticed actually going on since I actually was drafting this. The quote: "Black women do not have the brain processing power to be taken seriously. You have to go steal a white person's slot." End quote. Charlie Kirk, July 2023. And with the great things going on X that are happening on other platforms, with people being able to fact check live by the community, someone had already posted, this Strager person had already posted something in context, which is Elizabeth posting Charlie Kirk with that same quote, and it's an actual video of it. And that Elizabeth person was actually defending people who were calling her out in the comment section, saying she didn't actually say black woman. Like, someone's like, "Oh, that's what he said, this was in the video." And I'm like, no, that's not how quotations mark. Because before this has been updated in X, now there's readers added context, he did not say this. He mentioned specific individuals being DEI hires and them not having their brain power to be taken seriously. His comment was intentionally misconstrued to make him seem racist. And then there's a YouTube link there of the whole thing. It's worth noting that the title of this video is not accurate to its contents. So that's something they put there.
Obama and Sheila Jackson Lee and Ketanji Brown Jackson were affirmative action picks, we would have been called the racist. But now they're coming out and they're saying it for us. They're coming out and they're saying, "I'm only here because of affirmative action." Yeah, we know. You do not have the brain processing power to otherwise be taken really seriously. You had to go steal a white person's slot to go be taken somewhat seriously. Play cut 52.
But I rise today as a clear recipient of affirmative action, and particularly in higher education. I may have been admitted on affirmative action, both in terms of being a woman and a woman of color, but I can declare that I did not graduate on affirmative action. This is my personal story.
I hear because of action affirmative. She can't even say that. We know it's very obvious to us that you were not smart enough to be able to get in on your own. I couldn't make it on my own, so I needed to take opportunities from someone more deserving. You know, this is how arrogant Joy Reid and Ketanji Brown Jackson and Michelle Obama and Sheila Jackson Lee are. They're so narcissistic, they think this is persuasive. They think we're like, "Oh, of course, that's why we need affirmative action, because you have impressed us with your brilliance. Of course. Oh no, imagine the world without Joy Reid. Imagine the world without Sheila Jackson Lee or Michelle Obama or Ketanji Brown Jackson." They think this is persuasive. They think, as they kind of now reveal that I'm only here because of anti-white, anti-Asian forced discrimination policies that turned me into a bitter, resentful activist that hates white people, honestly, through...
But I'll just summarize what happened. First of all, collectivism is a heck of a hallucinogen, because I can imagine that what Elizabeth actually heard, probably as a black woman, definitely Nurses Against Dick Pics, Claudette, is a black woman, and it seems like a black woman. From the picture she's there, things she's talked about, things she's posted about, things she said. They are taking the thing where he literally meant this, because I decided I'm going to check. I'm researching this long-ass document. Might as well take the time, like Kirk did. I'm never going to get to the point where Kirk was. I can't imagine myself getting to the point where Kirk was, where he's just like calling out these information and just putting it out. But if I have time to research and time to go online, I can find some of this stuff. So I decided to actually go on. This is something I've been doing on the regular. If something happens, I just highlight, copy, paste the thing, right-click, search, Brave browser, whatever. So I did this. I decided to go to Brave search and just search the names of the 4 people he mentioned in that speech that he was giving there, and actually posted them and just searched them with affirmative action. So the first possibility for the referral, I think it was maybe Joy Reid, who actually had a post saying, "I got into Harvard." This is a literal thing from an MSNBC blog. "I got into Harvard because of an affirmative action. Some of my classmates got in for their wealth." And Reed does say that she had the grades too, but lacked the access. Michelle Obama, speaking about the same Supreme Court ruling of affirmative action that got Reed to write that original article, said that she got in without it, but occasionally felt self-conscious when other people looked at her and looked down on her, assuming that she was in there because of her affirmative action. Then Ketanji Brown Jackson was literally picked after the then President Joe Biden said that he would only pick a black woman, like he did with Vice President Harris, who missed a bullet with being President Harris, a figurative bullet with President Harris, because, oh man, Kamala Harris, who is black enough for Biden and most on the left because they are the one-droppers. And then if being charitable, I guess those 4 mentions can be grouped in as black women, but that's lost if you put it in the parentheses. You could have just done something like this Real Clear Politics title that says, quote, Representative Sheila Jackson Lee, then it's like the colon, I am, quote, a clear recipient of affirmative action, particularly in higher education, end quote. They did this because she was saying something else about introducing herself, referring to herself, saying she's a representative and whatnot. And then she said a clear recipient. So instead of putting all the stuff of intro, they said, I am outside of the quote. If they had just simply done that and said black women, quote, do not have the brain processing power, ... end quote, then you could argue that, okay, you're saying that, inferring that he was referring to multiple black women, even though I showed you with the actual research that I did, which I understand most people don't have the time to actually go in, but this wasn't like hours-long research and things like this, but these are just normal people posting things and they shared it around. And during the time that I'd found this and originally found this and done this research and I was doing it, then I recently went on X, and apparently some actual reporters, like one from the Washington Post in specific, was sharing this actual thing. Other reporters have done it. One Pulitzer Prize winning reporter had shared the same exact quote in that same way, and somebody was like, hey, I'll give you $10,000 if you can find me the actual quote. So people are sharing this without actually looking into that he's speaking about specific people who they themselves said they were there in affirmative action hires. But these people, at least the Washington Post person, she lost her job because when you're supposedly a reporter, and Washington Post will come up again later on with another black woman, these people on the left, you're ostensibly supposed to actually research these things, actually find actual sources. I know they've gone to like anonymous sources and people close to such and such said, and that's kind of how it's kind of devolved into, but you have a certain level of integrity that's being hoped. So you're losing your job, and it's a lot of people losing their jobs that are not losing their jobs because it's kind of different if you're talking about somebody's death, besmirching someone a certain way. If you're in a position where you can actually be liable, if you're doing something in a workplace like that, you're supposed to be pointing actual facts. So there's different situations like that going on. So Washington Post kind of realizes they got to do better. If they're going to stand to compete with what's going on out there, because they've seen it as well. Part of the reason I was like, I don't have to do this either way, because other people are finding sources. Other people are finding actual good information out there, actual good reporting, actually good commentary that's being done in a genuine, sincere, and honest sort of way, substantial way. And I'd been contemplating addressing Hungary and Benson's post in detail and breaking down every single thing and saying, okay, they said this was wrong, that was that, finding this source and doing all this. But here's an individual who happens to be black, gay, and more importantly, actually knew Kirk as a person. And he speaks about his individual experiences and understanding of things that other people claim that damn Kirk is this evil, white supremacist, horrible person that kind of, at best, you just don't have to care that he died, that he was assassinated. But in the worst cases, that he was a Hitlerian sort of character where it's not just imperative that you do what you do, but what need to be done, but it's heroic.
The purpose of this video is to serve as a tool to combat all the lies and misinformation that is commonly being spread right now about Charlie Kirk. And it's ironic because someone like Charlie Kirk is oftentimes called racist and homophobic, yet he's one of the main reasons this YouTube channel that you're watching right now even exists in the first place. He knew the young gay black Amir in 2018 and strongly advocated him to be more vocal online and spread his thoughts and to always seek the truth. Not even one day after the event, it was one day, the night of the first event I ever gone to in 2018, where I met Charlie Kirk for the first time, that I started being vocal online. And here we are today. And to this day, I still have one of the hats he even gave me. So I feel like this video is necessary because that's all Charlie ever did and pushed me to do and push everyone to do, is to seek out the truth. So I want to put the truth in his words in a very articulate manner. You can go through this video chapter by chapter, and it hits a lot of different marks and topics and things that are currently being said about Charlie Kirk.
So I skimmed over what he said, and it was like 50 minutes long, and he has a timestamped Second Amendment on empathy, gay people, trans people, racism, affirmative action, critical race theory, illegal immigration, and more. So check that out. And that's the thing, like, yes, some of the mainstream media is dying. People are not getting views. It's not working anymore. They're wondering, people are getting fired. People are losing jobs. People don't want information anymore. That's not the case. People want information more than ever, as much as they ever have, and that information is there. If you're willing to actually take some time and present it and put it out there, you're going to find people to do it. So it kind of inspired me. I'm like, okay, this person's putting out 50 stuff. People are taking the time, people putting things. Yes, people might be repeating certain things in certain ways, but who knows who's going to hear it from a certain way, in a certain language, in a certain diction, in a certain accent, in a certain form, in a certain communication manner that's going to stick with them. So it's still worth actually going out there. And this is what America is. A Black and gay individual can meet this person, have access to this platform, be cared for, care for the person, when relatively recently both Black and gay people were just discriminated against, looked down upon, thought about as inferior. And this is something I think people don't genuinely understand about Kirk. And I think that's a regular thing. People don't really seem to understand that. Yes, I've seen clips where it's like longer, or this is put in a certain way, but there's still some limitations to people understanding who Kirk was. I think he understood the risk that he was taking. People were close to him, and you can just tell from just being observant that he had security. He knew there were threats, but he thought no. He valued the freedom of speech that much, valued America that much, and thought going out there and speaking to people is what needs to be done. It's worth the risk. He didn't want to be a martyr, but because of that, because he risked that, other people consider him a martyr. Because of what he was doing, because of who he was, because of how he lived, despite how some people can't see that. He wasn't saying that. But when you have these Black people objecting to those MLK descriptions, now, Kirk himself didn't put that description out. Other people have put it out. But when you have someone like Michael Mouse, who pointed this out, that when Stephen Colbert, who, yes, he had a show that was relatively successful, but not enough to actually compete with the longer form, sort of unstructured, more genuine content that was going out that people still want, that system just not working. It doesn't matter if it's somebody else, just that system of the late night shows just doesn't work anymore as it once did. So Colbert loses his job. He's announced that they're not renewing the show. It costs a lot of money, and now he kind of gets to take his time and step off gracefully. If it was just a thing for the whole sale, why don't they just boot him off immediately? But no, so now people have rallied behind him. He's had like kind of that thing of like the final tour where an athlete is retiring and everybody knows he's retiring. So every time he goes to a different city, a different game, what's the last time he's going to be there, he gets cheered. People are like, this big pomp and glamour. So that's what has happening. A lot of celebrities are coming back for one more time in the show. And here Rolling Stone features again with an article where Colbert was referring to himself as a martyr. And he probably did it figuratively. But hey, that's what they do. I didn't really hear any Black people coming up and saying, oh no, only MLK is a martyr here. Yes, he didn't mention MLK, but as I mentioned, neither did Kirk. The whole up on the cross thing is a lot of people in the Black community that are relatively Christian. I don't see them coming out and saying, you're not like Jesus. But even in this article, they point out that after this whole back and forth with Jimmy Kimmel, he finishes the rest of his monologue and takes the time there to discuss how the president was buddies with a pedophile. And some people might say, okay, now that he's unhinged, he doesn't have to worry about renewing the season. He can just say all this filth, flour, and filth. I don't know about that thing. And now we can look at other people who are more independent, who don't have to worry about being sued, being a company, and hired, and whatnot in the other sense. And this is Brian Tyler Cohen, who recently was like, the Charlie Kirk shooting is beyond horrific, legitimately disgusted at the broken state of the country. And this was posted on September 10th when it just happened. But this person, Bad Hombre, decides to post these image macros of a lot of Brian Tyler Cohen's recent posts. Charlie got his marching orders, and he's being a good obedient boy. Nice work helping cover for the pedophiles, Charlie. Then remember when Charlie Kirk said to trust his friends in the government? Good boy, Charlie. The pedophiles are grateful for your service. Another one. Not Charlie admitting that his job is doing PR for the administration that's currently covering for a pedophile ring. That's just 3 of the 6 things here, and you could probably find more from people like him and others, but pedophiles. Probably saying that too much also is going to get knocked out. But that is another category that even average people who may never consider engaging in or supporting violence against a criminal would make exceptions for. And I am further on the side of what Cohen is referring here when it comes to the files and info. Like, I was for that under Trump's first term. It was also during Biden's, which I don't think Cohen can say, but you can miss me with all this national security considerations, release all the info, all the classified info. And I don't think Cohen would co-sign on this. He probably accepts that there are some limitations or things that the government should keep classified. I'm like, no, put it all out there. And also, that'll come up again later. But even though I know that they literally mean things figuratively, other people don't think that. When you talk about this pedophile stuff, there are people who will take it seriously. There are people who now are thinking, yes, this guy was defending pedos. They don't really factor in that this didn't happen during the Biden administration. They think like now there is a reason that this person is defending pedos. He knows these people. He knows Trump and them. So of course he knows they're pedos. So he might be on the pedo ring. So why are we upset about this pedo defender being like shot down? Like he should be shot down because of the pedo stuff. There's other people who are just like, yeah, he's a white supremacist. He hated all black women because I saw this black woman quote. So why should I as a black woman care about this? This man was a racist person. Because they haven't even taken that time because they trust these so-called experts who are giving them information to not be just fudging things up and giving them the actual truth. The truth, what is the truth, and the only thing but the truth. There's some saying on the truth thing going on there. But they don't get that even these people might be misinformed. There is misinformation where you just got information that you're wrong and you didn't get enough information and you say something you just misinformed because there's more information out there that you're unavailable, or you got bad information and you think it's true and that's not it. And then there's people who are engaging in disinformation who know something is wrong and intentionally go out there. And then there's malinformation, which I think is maybe the most pernicious version of it. That might be something that they sort of made up recently, but I think is accurate, where it's like true enough information, mixing up with these different things, edited, mixed together, mutated sort of things in order to just gunk up the system and reducing the ability for any actual information to be found. It's just mucking things up, and that's just a horrible situation.
What evidence do you have that I'm a racist?
I was just...
Call me a white supremacist. What evidence do you have that I'm a racist?
I was just literally watching a video of you talking about whiteness as a whole, talking about whiteness as a concept, okay? And you were trying to explain how white privilege doesn't exist.
Correct, it doesn't.
You are a white man. How do you know?
What can a white person do that a black person can't do?
Black applicants to jobs are 50% less likely to get jobs if they have a black-sounding name.
That's not even close to being true. That's not even close to being true.
That is a literal...
In fact, it's the opposite.
I'm not going to argue your lived experience. I'm not going to... No.
See, now you have to listen to him under your rules because a black person is going to say you're wrong.
I am. He can say I'm wrong. I know.
Come on up to the mic.
I know. I read your...
my name's Keemon Dixon. I have a really black name. Please tell me how 50% of my internships have been denied when I've worked for Senator Mike Lee, Mayor Trent Sachs, Speaker Mike Schultz.
Hold on.
I worked for a Congressman, Burgess Owens. I've actually worked on his campaign. I've worked on the campaigns of John Huntsman Jr. Please tell me how my black experience and my black name has not given me... Go ahead.
So next section, considering where X came from and where it may be going. So we're going to leave back people who might be sued for what they're saying. And this is a post here now for people in the public sector who are in this situation of these government people that I have the general mistrust for, that I said don't trust, because it's just a horrible situation that Congress people running for political office are allowed to lie in that process. It's kind of just accepted that they lie. And then once they're in Congress, it's illegal to lie to them when they ask you certain questions, but they also have protections as Congress people, like if they're speaking about certain things in their capacity as a congressperson, as a political actor, then they're actually immune from libel and blasphemy, not blasphemy. In other countries, maybe you have the Jesus stuff more in control. If some of these people got the control back, maybe that'd be in there. But they're protected from libel and lying. They can't be sued for that because it's like, hey, I'm a public official and this is what I can do. So we have a situation here of Jason Cohen posting Jasmine Crockett, who is a Democratic congresswoman from a district that got redistricted. So I don't know where she's going to be running, but she goes on to the Breakfast Club, the show Charlamagne the God. And she's just talking about how, quote, I literally have never said anything to invoke violence, and I challenge somebody to go and find a clip of a Democrat invoking violence. She said that. She literally said that quote. I'm using the quotations correctly.
can say that your policies are bad. I can say you're a criminal because you have been found guilty of 34 convictions. Like, I can say all these things because they are true. That's not even just free speech. These are just facts. So don't get mad that I speak the truth and I speak facts, but I literally have never said anything to invoke violence. And I challenge somebody to go and find a clip of a Democrat invoking violence. I can say.
And then under that, again, internet is amazing. People are just posting all these examples of these clips of these things, Democrats just instigating and saying, we got to beat these people up. Check out the clips. You might have seen them. The clips will be there in the article. You can check them out.
Punch. You have to be ready to throw a punch.
Donald Trump, I think you need to go back and punch him in the face.
That I thought he should have punched him in the face.
I feel like punching him.
I'd like to take him behind the gym if I were in high school. If we were in high school, I'd take him behind the gym and beat the hell out of him. No, I wish we were in high school. I could take him behind the gym.
I will go and take Trump out tonight.
Take him out now. Okay.
When was the last time an actor assassinated a president?
They're still going to have to go out and put a bullet in Donald Trump.
Show me where it says that protests are supposed to be
But
polite.
Jasmine Crockett is still on board for running for office. She understands that there's people in her target demographic that will not have the time to look and do believe them. And this is something that actually she can get enough votes for. That's what she's figuring, I think. But before we go away from this, you notice how there was Jason Cohen here, and before there was Brian Tyler Cohen. Both Cohens, both Jewish people. There's some rumblings and rumors of this Israeli plots and whatnot, and it was engaged with this, and Benjamin Netanyahu in his suspicious sort of way posting about Charlie Kirk really shortly after, like, I think it was like the same minute that Trump did. Yes, he might not have been directly watching the live thing, but even if he didn't have people who were accurately, genuinely, who are very on his side, sponsoring and funding Turning Point USA, he's interested. He's a military leader of a state who has his own personal political life and maybe his individual legacy and possibly his actual physical life on the line in this military thing that he's engaging with, Project Rising Lion, with the rebelization. I think actually today, as I'm recording this on the 17th, the IDF is officially now going to occupy Gaza. But of course he's interested. Of course he's going to politicize this. Of course he'll try to spin it to his favor. Of course, like Cenk said, of course he's going to come on and say it was Muslims who were in charge of this. Even he doesn't have to be like, oh, it's the Israelis who are doing this. It's just ridiculous. But when we're on the topic of Jews, continue to keep in mind that Hitler and the Nazis, along with the pedos, are another group of people where it's like justifiable to wage war against these people. And part of why I'm repeating this over and over again is part of why I decided to make this video even after seeing other people. Like I was watching Adam Carolla, who had this one comedian on who was named Josh Wolf. And I figure if you go on Adam Carolla's show, you probably know more about politics. You're probably more politically interested in general than your average American. This guy's on the political left. If you're a comedian as well, you're also researching some of these things to do your shows. But he came on and Adam Carolla was also pointing out what I had realized, that if you keep calling this person a Nazi, what is the one group that's okay for people to actually harm? It's the Nazis. So even if you have a country of millions of people, like 150 million people of adult age, even if you only have like 0.001% of that, I'm not going to do the math right now, you're going to have enough people who will take that seriously and do something. And this man, this Jason Cohen person was like, I had never thought of that. It's like, how have you not thought of that? How have you not thought of that? What were people thinking was going to happen when the New Republic has a magazine, American Fascism, with Trump and like the Hitler nose on it? When you have the New Yorker with Trump in a boat blowing some like a sail with, which is like the KKK flag with the KKK mask with the holes in it. What do people think when you're walking around with the 45? I remember going to protests because I was in the States at that time around 2016 when you had that like 45 with like a swastika symbol with a cross around it. What do you think people were saying, like bash the fash or punch that? What was happening when people were seeing just years and years of people in MAGA hats being assaulted in physical? When you had Maxine Waters saying, if you see those people in a restaurant, you got to confront them. What were people thinking of this? When the pandemic came and you saw the behavior that was happening to people, what were people thinking these people were capable of? It's why I think it's worthwhile to do this. It's why I am inspired. It's why I think it's going to be more people doing things like I do, more people talking to people in their lives. Be more effective in communicating these things. Don't assume that because you see something in a particular way, the people around you also agree. Get out there and talk. If there's something you disagree with, risk it. Get out there. It's not that big of a risk. You don't have to go on and make an international thing, travel around colleges like Charlie Kirk was doing. Just if somebody's in your office place, just say something if they say something. If your wife or kids or something just says something about someone else, just ask them what they think about this. Just do more. Use that freedom of speech that isn't there. Be the people that America can be and was and built it. Because the politicians are not going to help you. That's not where you're going to get the solution. And politicians who come from abroad also know this. You have Ilhan Omar here, who is posting this thing, which I had also seen in other locations. Data isn't vibes. If you need vibes, check out the hate-filled comics and the right wing will leave on this post and all my posts. So she posts this thing, extremist links deaths from 2013 to 2022. Then shows left-wing extremists on incidents and killings. Source: American Anti-Defamation League. It was analysis, and this was posted in the Washington Post. So those sources already are kind of sus. But it goes extremist-linked deaths. What does that mean, extremist-linked deaths? Is that specifically to ignore just the violence? Before, okay, that thing, the graph that Kirk used, that was in the thoughts. So the thoughts, what does that lead to the actual actions? How important is that? But then extremist leads deaths. This one you can say, okay, it's harder to fudge stats when you're talking about deaths because there's an actual body there. But when it comes to who or why that body was made a body and was no longer a human when it's unalived, that's more questionable. Like, what does extremist mean? Who's considered an extremist? What situation is extremist or is political? But Omar has learned, like I said with AOC, she's part of the squad and she's learned this is what you got to do to be a politician. It's not too uncommon. This is kind of common all around the world. But you see it in a different way in the United States of America. She realizes, yeah, you got to politicize things. Yeah, you got to speak to your tribe. I don't expect Hungry Black Man or Benson to really care about the deaths here in Africa, in other countries, in other places. They're not like every single Negro is someone that I care about. They don't care really about the deaths in Chirac because that's not them. I don't know. Maybe if they're living in Chicago, but do they care about the deaths all over the United States of America or every single black person? I don't think so. It's more the people in their tribe. What she cares about. When it's convenient to that, to keep in her position of power, that's what she's going to do. She realizes how bad it was in Somalia and she needs to leave. She's not going to be constantly speaking about, yes, occasionally she signals that I am also Somali, I also have something to this. That's to maintain her voting base. She doesn't really care like in that kind of way. I don't really see that, and I don't expect that. I kind of don't even really think she's being that racist. She may be racial, but she's not racist. Like, she's posting the Anti-Defamation League here, which is Jonathan Greenblatt kind of runs it. That is Jewish. I think, initially started mostly to fight anti-Semitism, but moved on to other things. So she's posting that. She's posting that now because it's convenient to what she wants to speak about. But she was probably vociferously against when this article came out that was spoken about. The ADL calls on House leadership to take action after Representative Omar's anti-Semitic tweets. She was actually censured, I think, for this. And now that she's kind of gotten wiser and smarter with how she says things, I think there was a time also back in 2019, this was pointed out by the ADL, that she was accused of actually being racist, and she apologized for that. And to be more charitable, I think she was newer in the United States of America, being more plugged into black culture. So I think when she was saying that it's all about the Benjamins, there's more about the Diddy song. Diddy also has issues now. It was more about that than inferring that Benjamin Netanyahu, and others who have that common Jewish name of Benjamin were controlling things with their filthy lucre, just like the same way that person, trained crazy person, I think, when you're saying like, I got white girl, it was more like just a phrase. It wasn't the actual thing, but regardless, that's what can happen. If you speak a certain way, people can hear a certain thing and infer a certain thing. You don't really have control of what you put out, and it's up to you to do the best that you can, but once it's out there, it's out there. I am not for the government censoring her. I understand why they did it, because they just have donors and other situations, and they figure, hey, let's do this. I understand some calculations there, but I wouldn't have expected an apology from her. I wouldn't have held it against her. There's this video of Charlie Kirk speaking to someone that they say she really reaches out and speaks to. This is a white male who was straight and proudly on the left, from what he said.
Let's go. Put up Put up or shut up, Charlie Kirk.
You know
Put
what?
Up or shut
So,
up.
first of all, it says very clearly in the Bible that we shouldn't harm those that are worthy of protection, and you obviously are.
You're just worried I'll kick your ass.
Well on Medicare age. But let's play this out. Despite the obvious fact, and you and I both know who would win this duel. However, hold on a second. This is a great embodiment of the American left. You can't debate, so you want to go to blows. You can't. The only thing that is preventing us from this country from going to civil war is debate and dialogue, and you don't even want to have debate. You want to go and you want to wrestle like a 7-year-old. Who here is actually dividing the country?
No. A gentleman's fist fight. You know what that is, right?
Again, I would like to think that we are elevated above trying to go have a fight in the streets or a fight in front of 2,000 people. In fact, a mark of civilization is that we don't have to go to blows or bullets, that we can have discourse and debate, but yet you're inviting that.
And you know that out here in the West, that's a bunch of bullshit.
Oh, really? You don't debate out in the
Real
West?
men stand up for what they believe.
You guys don't dialogue in the West?
Come on, man. Look, I know.
How about this? Why don't you, since you're a 70-year-old aged elder and you want to have a fist fight with a 31-year-old?
Is that how old you are?
Why don't you tell me what a woman is?
See, I am not here to debate you. I'm here to prove you wrong. Prove you wrong. Prove him wrong. So either put up or shut up. I'll walk away. You tell me right now.
I will say this.
Let's go.
I will say this. I'm not going to fight you because I don't have to. Because you know why?
You don't have to.
You are acting as if someone who is very desperate, who is clout chasing. We are going to remain peaceful while the left promotes violence. We are going to be the peace because, as Christ our Lord said, blessed are the peacemakers, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Thank you, sir, and get out of here.
I'll let you take the first punch. Let's go. Put up or shut up, Charlie Kirk.
You know
Put
what?
Up or shut
so,
up.
First of all,
you can see from the video, he says, I'm here to prove you wrong, not to debate. That's what the person is saying. I'm not here to debate you. I'm here to prove you wrong. And to this belligerent interlocutor, he was talking about how we need to use words, pointing out that if we don't use words, if words fail, then people resort to bullets. But you don't see those gun control people pointing this out and saying, okay, look how aggressive this person was being. Look how this person was refusing to talk. And look how Charlie Kirk condemned violence. They don't talk about that. And the violence he was condemning was also including stabbing, which would have covered that. And I will reiterate that regardless of how aggressive this person was, I'm still glad that person went down. I'm still glad we have this video because I am against the concept of hate speech as a legal designation to be targeted by state governments all around the world. And I'm in alignment with Charlie Kirk here as well, because back in May 3rd of 2024, he said this: hate speech does not exist legally in America. There's ugly speech, there's gross speech, there's evil speech, and all of it is protected by the First Amendment. Keep America free. So when you hear current Attorney General Pam Bondi saying this while invoking Kirk's name, there's free speech and then there's hate speech. And there's no place, especially now after what happened to Charlie in our society. We will absolutely target you, go after you, if you are targeting anyone with hate speech. You remember another blonde some may be forgetting. Remember how iryna Zarutska did not say any words. Remember how it was not some anti-blonde white girl podcast that got this individual to stab her, but probably a state of mental illness that led them to be unable to process reality. A state of ill mental health that others must have or may have to have some minor form of to genuinely think that Bondi and the same judicial system that led to iryna being there in front of that man that they allowed to be in that chair to begin with can change some laws around and keep you and those you care about safe. I was really encouraged to see that people rallied. Yes, there were some people debating like we shouldn't do this, we shouldn't do that, we should reprise in this way. It was people on the political right doing this. But when Pam Bondi came out to say this, there was some unity of people just kind of like, no, don't do this. Not only did Charlie Kirk, would Charlie Kirk be against this in his own words, in his literal words, repeatedly from his actions, shown and clear he's not for this. We don't want this. We are in agreement that this is not the reaction that we want to have back to this. Very few voices I've seen actually being like, okay, yeah, she should do this. And that reinforces in my mind that the world before September 5th did not change. It's nothing much has significantly changed about the structure of the world before that video was released. Before some of us saw Charlie Kirk get assassinated, not much of the general structure and feelings of the American public have changed. Our perception of those things might have changed from what we've seen that was going on, but the people, the corpus of the body politic is the same. The mentality, the capabilities are still the same, the capacities. What has changed is the perception. And this reaction to what Pam Bondi said and other things have encouraged me that people are not going to let it go back to politics as usual. People are going to see that we need more speech. Like, we can't have this ability of the state to stifle speech or other people are stifling speech. We need to go out there and talk more. Yes, we've identified some individuals that are beyond speech that we don't have to deal with right now, but the vast majority of people are willing and able to speak. And think of how much Kirk had spoken. All those times, and nobody did what that one individual did at that Utah Valley University. And that should be something that people keep in mind. And on to the final section. 2 far-right white men from normal Republican families. So they got someone. Forbes Breaking News is a good YouTube channel. I normally use it because they post things in full context without commentary. Yes, they have a commentary aspect, but very often when it comes to the socio-political issues in the United States of America, they'll just post the full things without advertisements, without any embellishments, and just out there for you to see it. So I suggest those of you interested in that can check that out. So here they just had the press conference that said, breaking news, authorities announce arrest of Charlie Kirk's assassination suspect. So that was a very early thing, of course. So from the first info about how his Republican father turned him in, some began to say that he's a white supremacist who took Kirk out for not being as white supremacist as he was. He wasn't white supremacist enough, this person thought, so I'm going to shoot him. That's what some people were actually saying. Some people are still saying that. Shortly after, we got reports that a transgender partner that this person may have been living with was cooperating with investigations. And that reinforces those people that were saying that he was radicalized by having just started attending a leftist-controlled higher education system, which I call schooling indoctrination complexes. I have a lot of content on that, links in the bio and things. So occasionally I try to think that if somebody truly, honestly, genuinely, sincerely believes what they're saying, what can I infer about other thoughts and beliefs that they have? So some people are saying, okay, the right's way of living is so true and self-evident that a semester in a school can turn someone into an assassin. And for the left, it's so based on environment and self-evident in outward appearance of the person that a normal person from an apparently stable home cannot be on the left. But again, they generally mean things figuratively. Imagine if people actually thought that, like, oh, you had to be gay in order to have gay kids. Then how would the reproduction happen when we didn't have this adoption and in vitro fertilization and surrogacy and things like that? But there's a post here by Kazin D. Asiedu that says, realizing how much distortion there was of Charlie Kirk's message is red-pilling me all over again. And this was a post by Holon, which is example, and this is Charlie Kirk takes down anti-gay extremists.
So when gay marriage was legalized nationwide, the conservative movement has been explicitly pro-traditional family. Now, both you and your organization advocate for the acceptance of anti-Christian, immoral lifestyles like homosexuality and transsexuality, going as far to invite drag queens like Lady MAGA to your events. It seems to me and anyone who's paying attention that conservatives just believe whatever liberals believed 5 years ago. Right now, there's a push by the left to normalize pedophilia by way of child drag queen shows and... Oh, excuse me. Phone shut off.
Go back to your notes. That's probably where you saved it. You know, you got to like push double tap and then go over.
Right now, there is a push by the left to normalize pedophilia by way of child drag queen shows and rebranding pedophiles as minor attracted persons. 5 years from now, will you be promoting child drag queen shows? Will child abuse become part of the conservative platform?
Boy, that's a slippery slope fallacy if I've ever seen one. First of all, I've never invited a drag queen to come to any Turning Point USA event. I was at Politicon, and an individual by the name of Lady MAGA came up, and I took a picture, and she walked away. Secondly, let me ask you a question. Are you a Trump supporter?
Yes, sir.
So are you a proud Trump supporter?
Of course.
So are you sickened that he had a gay man speak at his convention?
Yes.
Then you're not a Trump supporter, my friend. Thank you very much. Let me ask you another question. Should he return the money of Peter Thiel, an openly gay man who supports his campaign?
No, if it helps him strategically, sure
Okay.
he can.
Should he stop talking to Tammy Bruce, who's an open lesbian that's a Fox News contributor?
If it's affecting his ideas, then probably, yeah.
And this is somebody who I think is more like a actual extreme person, far right person, like people who they think Kirk actually is like these Groyper sort, who are sort of acolytes of somebody named Nick Fuentes, who apparently has said some pretty decent and level-headed thing by people that I think are decent and level-headed who have watched what he said. I just kind of avoid his content and whatnot. But this person himself is more inflammatory and just blatantly, ragingly anti-gay from a Christian point of view. And Charlie Kirk just calls him out and says, "Oh, you're not a Trump supporter if you're against gays." And he mentions several of the gay friends that he has and prominent people in the Trump administration that are homosexuals, that are gay. And he says, that's not what we're about. That's not what I'm about. And on this topic, Stephen King came out, and this is just the thing, I don't understand why people are rushing so much into this. Stephen King is somebody who writes. You should understand the power of words. And he goes out and he puts out this quote that Charlie Kirk had about the Bible, quoting something from the Bible, and then somebody tells him and points out that, hey, he was saying this because somebody else was saying they support gay marriage based off of something in the Bible, and Charlie Kirk himself has come out and said, in his reading of the Bible, he believes that marriage is sanctified under God to be between one man and one woman, even though he doesn't object to people having civil unions under the protections of the state, regardless of what sort of coupling and numbers that it is. So he had a conversation with someone who was using the Bible to defend and say, no, it's between a man and a woman, that's actually legit. And he's like, no. If you want that, I can point out this quotation from the Bible about stoning and then say that's why I'm going to go out. But clearly he's not stoning gay people. But Stephen King just reposted this. Many people reposted this. Stephen King is in a position where I think now he's actually being sued by Charlie Kirk's widow. I'm not quite sure. But regardless, he came out and apologized. But why would he just repost this? Why is this so? Why is there this drive that people must put this individual in one team or the other? Kirk is dead, but this assassin is alive. Now, it's a bit suspicious that announcements are coming out. Dan Bongino finally popped out. I guess not finally. He might have been on Fox a lot more. I stopped watching Fox. But he came out and he said, okay, this person's on suicide watch. If they Epstein this kid, I am going to be so suspicious of what's going on. Right now, it does seem relatively like what some people are saying. I expect that people who are speaking on this have a lot of information that we do not have. And there's also information that we'll never have. But when it came to actually catching this person, did they actually catch him actively? Or did they release images and then the dad turned him in after other people were like, hey, this is you. And the dad confronted him. This is a supposed story out there. But I'm basing this on the little that I know, and I do not discount the known unknowns. Like what other footage and info do they already have and is available that they're actually going through? And then there's all the unknown unknowns that may remain that way. And I do know that at least one individual took aim at a man who was speaking to another individual and pulled the trigger, which sent a bullet flying that ended the life of said man. So addressing all this, they killed him. Who is the they that they're speaking about? He's apparently not speaking right now. But what if that changed and he came out and said his main motivators were a prominent person on the left wing and a prominent person on the right wing? He said, okay, the left-wing person specifically said that Kirk was making the world dangerous for the LGBTQ community plus IA, whatever is in there, the alphabet people, and especially the trans ones like his partner. So he thought that he had to do something about it. He knew that his partners and other trans people, he was an ally to them, but he knew that if one of them did it, the greater society would conveniently blame trans people, adding to the recent cases of shootings by individuals that were pushed to the brink who were just rightfully fighting against the ongoing trans genocide. Then on the right wing, he saw somebody that he considered was more middle of the road on the right, but prominent on the right wing, and they're saying, okay, this person is admonishing Charlie Kirk for being funded by Israel and afraid to speak out about the ongoing genociding of Gazans. And on that same internet where I saw Iryna bleed out and saw the shoot of Charlie Kirk, there's a lot of videos of the horrific stuff going on in Gaza. So this person has that in their mind, thinking that. And it's like this person, Charlie Kirk, is being paid by the people who are doing this so he can defend the pedophiles in the government that are funding this. And then he's going to universities where the administration he helped put into power was also stifling free speech of the brave voices on the left of... So his fascist organization, this Turning Point USA, fascist organization, fascist government, fascist people, they were bringing their boot down on those brave and stunning voices on the left that were just trying to speak out on colleges for those poor Gazans to spread this hateful speech of his. So even if this individual didn't come out and say this, but it's inferred that in the communities and groups and circles that people are researching this proposal involved in, that they find voices from the right and the left who did this, would those people be included in the they who killed them? And the people who are saying they, including J.D. Vance, who I think is a pretty chill guy, is saying the they, people who are way too good with words at being way too vague with certain things for me to not be very concerned. And sure, you have professional hitters who exist and they're employed by the public and private sectors, and they can plan things down to a T and be in and out with no trace. Like, yeah, one thing I'm thinking is like, here, you set up this person to shoot while there's actually a professional person taking the shot. You give them a fake gun that doesn't necessarily work. And then when it's set the time for the guy to shoot, you shoot, and then like you get off while people are chasing this other person. That's kind of thoughts. When it comes to the Butler thing, that's kind of what I think is suspicious. Why was that Butler car had like apparently bombs? Did you guys hear about that? Apparently there was like bombs in the thing. Was the guy thinking I'm going to do this instead of the bombs? So regardless, there's people who can do that. But that's not a myth. It's not strictly movies, games, and other sorts of fictional entertainment. These people actually exist. But there's also a wider range of things that you, me, anybody else listen to this could actually do right now that we are not doing. A few more of us could actually plan to do something in a few days or weeks and pull that off that we can't do immediately if we wanted to do it. Chances are that we think of and do things on a relatively regular basis that will be unthinkable to some people. But when it comes to ending a life, though, that's something that most of us think about and are relatively certain that we would not do. And many can think of scenarios where they would, in defense of themselves and others, but still regret the action after they did it. And I think few who have been pushed to where they think and plan to do it proactively, like end someone's life, seek them out and do it. I think very few people have been pushed to that point. But I think in most cases, once the deed is done, it's so significant of a thing that even the best laid plans could fall apart after the shock of it all. And in most cases, the ones who get away with it, the ones who don't get caught, they don't do it due to some high level planning and smarts on their part, but rather that the system or people interested in catching them is just too incompetent to do so. So will things get darker? Somewhat. But in testament to who Kirk was and what he chose to do with his life, I trust that it will generally be positive, and that's what I've seen in these last couple of days. Millions of people who thought that there was no need to speak up in their personal capacity because Kirk and others were doing it so well in a public one will now not let things go unsaid that could have significantly improved the socio-political climate in the USA and other places. An infinitesimal number of people may be driven to act out in physical violent ways, and some of the tension from increased conversation will escalate into physical altercations, but this is more just like if you haven't used certain muscles, you haven't done certain activities, you'll get sore as you do it. And the body politic hasn't had certain important conversations. So there will be some tension of that as people get used to that. But certain people are better adjusted than others. Certain behavior is more constructive than others. You generally do not become supportive of a man like Charlie Kirk because you trend towards violence. So what Charlie Kirk was doing was better than what was done to him. People generally bounce back to this politics as usual rhetoric of divisive demonization when Trump survived his attempt in Butler. And I think that's in part due to just how iconic and of a character that the God Emperor of the United States of America is. He was also in the political sphere as a president. It's more common for these people to have shots taken at them, even though it was less common for some time in the West. It's something that's gone on in most countries. It's coming back, unfortunately, in some ways. It's happening, but it was different. I think it was different. And of course, he also survived, so that was a bit different. But whatever circumstances led to Charlie Kirk no longer being able to directly perform in his private capacity or on any socio-political stage, his effect will continue to inspire other performances. Some people will decide to make those performances available for public consumption. Like I'm one of those people. Many more, as I mentioned. And I will close off with that. His wife, Erica Kirk, made her first public statements, and people have reacted to them in interesting ways. After the announcement of the address, though, this was the aforementioned Mark Halperin in anticipation as he wondered why CNN and MSNBC were not covering it live, whereas the BBC was, and he wrote that. And I responded that I am surprised that he's shocked, and I can think of a myriad of reasons of why this is reasonable, this is expected from them. And it maps on to some of these outlets not airing Trump live because they fear that he could say inflammatory things that whomever watches them should be protected from hearing without their expert filtering. I recently found out that Halperin went to school and grew up in the same suburbs that I was in middle and high school in. And he probably has friends and associates like I do from there that are actually willing to engage in discourse over things they disagree with. But just like when I ventured out to West Virginia for college for the first year and got a different perception of what the United States of America was, then I returned to Bethesda, Maryland, and I was able to perceive the bubbles that we lived in when we were there, me and my friends and everybody else that was in there, and even some other friends. There was actually a different friend who told me, like, hey, like, this is related to that. They just said, like, hey, remember when we were walking around as kids in school and wondering who are all these adults that live in Bethesda? And I'm like, yeah, I remember that. He's like, yeah, they're our friends. And I still do have some friends who did move back there. But he may not have been able to see how the mainstream media would certainly do certain things like this, like hide the stuff from Trump and people they considered to be inflammatory while he was part of the media. But now that he's stepped out and he's doing things independently, he's getting a different point of view. His perception has changed. And remember, his perception also changed right now from what he had seen before. He had seen all this stuff before, and I was adding it up due to this incident. Remember, this is what he said before. For the first day, I refused to believe that anyone was actually going on social media to celebrate Charlie's murder. Then I realized there was, in fact, some of it, but I assumed it was a very small amount. Now I see how naive I was. What is wrong with someone who would do that? Emily Kirk's address to the nation is what ends off this blog post, this long research paper document thing, or whatever this is. And before I actually watched it, I heard it was coming out. I saw one person say in the comments that she couldn't even muster alligator tears. Well, it wasn't the comments. It was comments of somebody who got like a screen grab or a clip or something. I just don't even know. But in the grander scheme of things, what this person's said, their words, means very little. And it's more of an issue of who they are and those they associate with, that they thought this is something that they should say and accept. And that's similar to the reaction of people wondering, like, why would these people just so openly and gleefully cheer? Because they were existing in a sort of mentality, in a sort of space that they thought they would be celebrated and supported for cheering the assassination of someone. They are people who are genuinely surprised that people are actually losing their jobs for doing that. Like, dude, y'all are celebrating somebody being assassinated. Like, come on. And then after I watched the address, I'm just like, could these people really say this and have seen the whole thing? But yeah. in some ways, possibly they could. That person who was mocking Erica Kirk, they had some thoughts of how they were going to present themselves, present information, and then they thought there's going to be a public audience. What is the audience that I'm doing this? I'm going to format this in this way, and I'm going to type it out and send it, and that's how I'm going to present myself. And the same thing went on with me watching what Erica Kirk was doing. I'm not a telepath, so I cannot tell what the thoughts and feelings that this commenter had. I know when I was watching Erica Kirk, I was also thinking that it's very hard to try and imagine being in that position, what she felt. But I could also see, like, okay, they staged this in a certain way. They put the hat in a certain way. There was a light thing. Yes, she was reading off of something. So there was an involvement. She understood the assignment, as some people say, where this was speaking not just for herself, but for the rest of the people. And that kind of goes further to the images of her at the casket, which for me, I'm like, I can't imagine doing that. But she was the wife and supportive of someone who had chosen to go out and preach not just about politics, but about God, that I think she shares a belief in the justifiable nature, the righteous nature of what they were doing. And there's an aspect of that. She, I think, realizes that, yes, Charlie Kirk was my husband, was the father to my children, was my friend, but she also knew the man that he was and what he meant to others. And I think realized that there's more people who would benefit from seeing Charlie Kirk in that place in that way that couldn't be there than there was who would be put off by it. She doesn't really care about these people who are mocking her for that. Perception matters. Kirk, his wife, and others who knew of and supported him, either personally or publicly, knew how he may be perceived by saying and doing what he did. They knew the risks. Agree or not, I think she still thinks it was worth it. I appreciate Mrs. Kirk for her strength and brave declarations, and I think I can represent millions of people when saying I'm genuinely affected by imagining the loss that she, those at Turning Point USA, and the rest that cared for Charlie are feeling.
Jesus. Good evening. My name is Erica Kirk. Charlie Kirk is my husband.